Okay. Good evening. I'm going to start the meeting for this Scrutiny Overview Committee. Welcome. Just like to remind council members, officers and members of the public that in regards to mobile phones, that if you receive a call, you will need to leave the meeting. There is a member's attendance sheet being circulated, asking people to sign. In regards to the paperwork, we've got a very thick agenda tonight, and so we ask people that when you're referring to a page that you go and use the pack number in the bottom right hand corner, which will make it easier for all of us to find the correct page. And finally, this meeting is being webcast. So it's being filmed live and for subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site. Generally, the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings being used for the purposes described. And officers and councillors, please note that the webcasting system uses the signal from the microphone systems, so you're all reminded to please use the microphone provided to ensure your contribution is recorded. Please also turn the microphone off again when you finish speaking. Okay, what I'm going to do is slightly reorder the meeting because Councillor Watson is not here for the start of the meeting. So we're going to take items 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5, and then I'll bring forward the annual report, item number 9 forward. That should give us the time. So, item 1, apologies for absence.
None, Chair.
And I'm assuming now we've got apologies for lateness from Councillor Watson. Well, he's come and told us, so yes. So, item 2, which is the minutes. We need to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the Tuesday the 16th of February, which is pack page 1, and Monday the 7th of March 2016, which is pack page 15. Agreed? Okay. Disclosure of interest. Item 3, members are invited to disclose any interests that are not already on the register of interests. Forms are available from Karen.
I see from the presentation that the credit union is mentioned, and I just wanted to declare that I'm a member of the credit union. It's not a pecuniary interest, but just in the interests of transparency.
In that case, I better declare that I'm also a member of the credit union, and actually something that I've recommended to all councillors and officers and the public to be, again, a non-pecuniary interest. For urgent business, there isn't any. Item 5, exempt items. I will ask the committee to agree the allocation of business between Part A and Part B. There is a Part B papers here. I think it's more to do with, I think that the papers have yet to be agreed rather than any confidential information, but they are in Part B at the moment. So I'm just going to ask the committee to agree that allocation of business. Agreed. So, as previously mentioned, I'm going to bring forward item 9, which in terms of the pack is pack page 79, and it's regarding the annual report, and Solomon Agutu is the statutory scrutiny officer by law. Which is why it's statutory. Do you just want to have a quick introduction on it?
Yes, Chair. If I may ask you to turn to page 83, which is the contents page. What I'd like to draw committee's attention to is the way that this annual report has been organised. We are trying to draw attention to a number of things. First of all, Section 1 gives an overview of the scrutiny function in Croydon, what is scrutiny, etc. Section 2 is, in a sense, quite unique for this year because members will remember that scrutiny looked at what scrutiny outcomes framework could be. So, for instance, what are the outcomes that scrutiny is proposing to give? And in doing this report, members will remember that we looked at the different headings of the framework, like community involvement, public services awareness, ward member involvement, and scrutiny member involvement as outcomes. And this report demonstrates how committee has met its own outcomes framework. And then Section 3 makes reference to specific committee reports and the work of specific committees. I'd like to draw attention to the local action mini-reviews, which is set up on page 9. Which is page 93. Members will remember that that the local action mini-review is an opportunity for councillors, individual councillors or ward councillors, to lead a particular scrutiny, and it takes the place of the task and finish groups, which tended to be the whole committee doing a task and finish group. This allows an individual councillor to do that. Currently, there are 2 mini-reviews going ahead. One is by Councillor Kerry Meyer, leading on school exclusions, and then Councillor Andrew Rendell is leading on the issue of travellers. And both of them are quite complex, and we really do not expect a report until after June. Beyond that, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
In terms of comments, if there's no questions, one, I'd like to thank the officers for pulling this together. I have to, Scrutiny is a committee made up of non-executive members from both political parties. And as the press has has mentioned on more than one occasion recently, it is the council at its best. I think I may have to put that in quotes, the current advertiser. Partly because it does have public involvement more than some of our other committees. And if you look through page 83 in terms of the just in context, but committees such as the Children and Young People's Children and Young People's Housing Scrutiny Subcommittee, which was a special committee set up by this committee for young people to, one, have experience of public involvement and scrutiny, but also giving them a chance to look into a subject that they felt was the most important to them, but also to receive help and support in that. But also, just looking through the number of Cabinet member question times. Most of this work couldn't have been done without the officers' support. So I just want to put it on record, and I'm sure there may be support from this, to thank the officers for the hard work. In a time of limited resources, we wouldn't have been able to achieve half of this without the support of the officers concerned. But I also would like to give this an opportunity to say to the members of the public that if you have some new ideas that you'd like us to look at, we'd be very keen to hear from the public or even officers who have something that they think that needs either challenging or something that is currently not being looked at, or they have a new idea that they would like to see the council to pursue. Otherwise, if there's no other comments, I will... Carton? It's likely to be a subject, I think, that we're going to cover under the question time. It's certainly the part of the reason why that subject was in the Croydon Advertiser was due to a scrutiny committee looking at the nighttime economy, but also because it's not the first time a report has been made that the police have taken an over-enthusiastic approach to certain music genre, and by implication, in some cases, in groups or communities in Croydon. It's something that, as I said, I think we may again be looking at in the next 20 or 30 minutes, and you'll certainly be welcome to make that point when the Cabinet members in the room. In terms of scrutiny, we made some recommendations that went to Cabinet yesterday. But I think within our own role in scrutiny, we've ourselves have said that it's something about looking at licensing is something in regards to the allegations that have been in the press is something that I think this committee is in agreement that we should undertake. So, Carlton, I think is a good question, but we're on the case. Then,
Sorry, Chair. I felt it was important to draw attention to some health scrutiny items in particular. This year, we've looked at the London Ambulance Service at a time when the CQC report gave it a very bad rating. And at the same time, we've had a number of joint overview and health scrutiny committees. This is joint health committees with other London boroughs, and there's one going on at the moment on mental health with South West London boroughs. There's one about to start with South East London boroughs about the a place of safety facilities that are being proposed to be centralised in Southwark and removed from the boroughs. And there's a possibility of a London-wide London Ambulance Service scrutiny, joint scrutiny, in order to look at the lessons that can be learned from the CQC report. So health has been a very big item during this year, and I suspect it's going to be during the coming year as well. Just want to draw that to your attention.
Thank you, Solomon. I would just want to add to that. I mean, all the committees have worked very hard, but I think the Health, Social Care and Housing Scrutiny Committee have got a particularly heavy workload, particularly now that the CCG and other parties are now engaging with scrutiny much more, and we are now getting items to review. So, we are undertaking a review of the Constitution, and one of those ones is about whether the role of that committee should be changed, in particular whether housing should come out of that work, because there's plenty enough work in health and social care to keep that committee busy. So there's a potential change that will free up some more time for that committee to carry out its valuable work in scrutinising our health partners. Otherwise, any other comments? Okay, so we still sort of don't have the Cabinet member responsible for the 3 items. So I'm assuming then that we might as well go on to item 10, which is the Scrutiny Work Programme for 2015-16. We've already heard one, which will be on the list, which is about the whole licensing and the articles in the newspapers about certain music and the impact that may have on individual communities in Croydon. There is obviously page 79 of the pack. There are other suggestions that we want people to put forward. I've certainly have had a couple of people contact me just recently about issues which I need to pass forward to you, Karen. But I don't know whether there are any other suggestions from the membership at the moment. as I said, I've made that offer to the public to please send them through. Otherwise, we will take that item as read. It's page 159, I should be said. Yep.
In terms of the work programme, I just wanted to highlight the fact that we're very keen to do pre-decision scrutiny as well as, if you like, post-decision scrutiny, because then that gives us an opportunity to influence the ultimate decision, and I think we've been reasonably successful in doing that over the past year.
I agree. The thing about pre-decision scrutiny, it is, we are relying on senior officers, Sarah, please note, and cabinet members for people to send items to us early in the process. Otherwise, it does, in some cases, become post-decision scrutiny, and we end up with call-ins. And it's much more effective if we can have an early look. Though that didn't stop 20 mile an hour coming back. Hint, hint to certain members. But otherwise, yes, I agree with you. Pre-decision scrutiny, overviewing strategy would maybe an effective tool for influencing the council rather than just waiting to the last moment. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll take that item as read. I'm going to suspend the meeting because we can't take the other three items, and I'm going to unsuspend the meeting. Yes. Welcome, Councillor, to the meeting. We've gone through some other items on the agenda, so we are about to start item 6, which is Councillor Members' Question Time. So you've just walked through the door, because it's been quite difficult to have carried it out without you here. So what we have, I believe you're going to give a presentation. I understand Councillor Avis is also here in her own capacity as the Chair of Licensing Committee, though you're more here for observation, though you may be able to answer questions if necessary. I also understand that your presentation is just going to be on the items that are not covered, that are the items within your portfolio that are not covered under the other two items on the agenda. Yes. That is the case. So I'll hand it over to you.
Right, next slide. So as people know, my portfolio covers a number of different areas. The voluntary sector and community sector, which we'll be talking about later, and the crime and safety portfolio, licensing, etc., which again we're covering later. So just to cover a couple of points of some of the other bits that we've been doing through the portfolio first. So next slide. So one of the big pieces is about the whole welfare reform programme. I'm not going to read all these slides out, but essentially the whole welfare reform and how we've been managing that as a council has actually been commended nationally. We've had people down here from select committees talking about the great work we've done here. We've tried to take a very holistic approach to welfare. Instead of putting people from one department to another, quite often saying, well, we can't help you until you're homeless, so wait for people to leave their home. We actually start interacting with people earlier on in the process on that, trying to help people to budget better, to manage their finances, to try and keep them, to manage the process, I think, has been very much part of what we've been doing, take a holistic approach to residents. We've had to manage with the welfare reform changes, and that's the caps, etc., and manage residents through that. Going forward, there's the rollout of universal credit, and we've been a trial area for that, but it will become, obviously, the rollout generally first, and some of the issues that have come up with that trial. We've been looking at those residents affected by the cap and what that means to them, and taken them through that. And of course, we've been dealing with that with obviously the cuts in the funding we've faced. Next slide. So some of the successes from that is that we've been able to offer residents, the residents with the biggest issues, was a lot of support through the whole process, particularly those that were impacted by universal credit. We've had proper financial inclusion plans and supporting many of the residents to get them into a more financially stable place, and that, to say, is much helping them with things like budgeting and looking at where their expenditure is and helping them go through where all their expenditure is and finding ways to help reduce that expenditure. And I think there's just the achievements on there that we have supported to over 2,500 residents, positive outcomes, moving people into more affordable homes, getting people out of B&B, and getting residents to manage their budgeting and debt advice. And remember, a lot of the residents actually have debts with the council anyway, so giving them support and advice to manage that actually benefits the council as a whole. Next slide. The challenges ahead in universal credit, clearly the rollout across all of our households will make a big difference. We have households without bank accounts. We have households that are not used to budgeting in that way. There's going to be it is a big upheaval for many of our residents that already have quite chaotic lifestyles already. So how we support those is going to be very key to the work going forward. And I think the way we're approaching this holistic approach, which actually I would think is quite common sense. It was quite interesting when the Select Committee were down here. They were like, well, this is fantastic. We've been to loads of places and nobody's doing anything near to what you're doing in Croydon. So I think we can be proud of the officers and the work that they've done so far on that. And I think that will put us in a good position to manage some of these challenges. But there will be challenges, I think, as we roll out universal credit. There's obviously the welfare reform caps as well coming through, which impact some residents. And a lot of those residents we've already helped once to go through the changes, so we've got to help them again go through further changes. And then we have a whole financial inclusion plan, and there's a paper that I brought to Cabinet recently, which relates to how we help residents going forward. And part of that includes the work we're doing around the credit union, but beyond. And it's really helping residents to manage things like the jam jar accounts within the credit union, so people can actually, their money comes into the credit union and we can manage that out. So say that's your direct debits for your rent, your electricity, etc. And here's the amount you have left to spend, so people can help manage their budgets. For a lot of people aren't used to managing monthly budgets, and I think that's going to be a lot of challenge. So there's a lot of work to be done, I think, around that. But I think where we are as a council, I think we can be very proud of this work the officers have done to manage that in the most compassionate and holistic way for our residents. Next slide. The other part of the work that we're doing, which sort of fits in as well, because we've done the financial inclusion back in making sure we don't leave people behind financially. But the other bit is how we ensure that residents are digitally enabled. And as you know, I'm a passionate advocate for getting people online. I think people are missing out if they're not online, and I think as a council we should do everything we can to support people using the internet and getting online. Not only does that save them money, but it's I think it makes them more connected. When we're talking about social isolation, it can be a very useful tool for older people to connect with people. There's a whole range of benefits for people to get online. And it's not just older people. There's a lot of older people who are online, but there are some young people. I was talking to a young guy the other day who's from New Addington, and he was saying, well, he uses his phone a lot, but he's never been online because he never had a chance. He never had a computer at home. They wasn't really taught at school on it. So there are some people that have missed out in the digital revolution, and I think they're going to miss out completely. We want small businesses to be able to have good digital skills so they can have websites, etc., and market themselves, because a lot of them will lose business if they don't have those. So I think the skills that we're trying to foster there are good for both the health and well-being of our residents, but I think also for the economy, both their personal economic circumstances, but also for the borough as a whole. The next slide. And I think one of the things we look at, people talk about accessing council services. Now, getting people to access council services saves us money, so there's a real good incentive for the council to get people online. But actually, I think for a lot of people, accessing services online is their preferred way of accessing services. I mean, I reported my missed bin the other day, and it was a very, very easy process to do online, and actually much more preferable than actually to try and phone up and get to a call centre, etc. It's a far easier process to do that. And we have 140,000 residents already signed up to my account, and 100,000 of those we are now communicating through the My Croydon weekly email. We were the first London Borough to be engaged with the Go On launch, and that was again the paper I brought back to Cabinet. And again, this is about working with partners, and a number of partners, that's businesses, local groups, etc., to work to get people online. I think it's a very exciting and innovative project. We now have 14 digital zones across the borough. We hope to have about 36 of those. Some more are coming. We've done deep dives investigating approaches to digital technology. And then we have the Access Croydon, and where people come into Access Croydon, and instead of just saying to people go online, we will help people to go online, help them set up an email account if they need that, to actually walk them through the process. And when you hear the stories of people, and they say, well, actually, I've been to Norbury Church and looking at one of their projects up there, and there was an older guy, probably in his 80s, and he said it was fantastic. He was sitting there reading all about foxes, which is, you know, an interesting thing. In Croydon, we've got a lot of foxes. But he was saying he's never had the opportunity to actually find all this information at his fingertips, and it was actually incredibly useful and interesting to them. And I think what we have to do with people is trying to find an interest for them. If they can show that using the internet and using the web is actually useful to them, I think we get more people engaged in that process, and that's been very much our approach. Next slide. We're also getting the staff to sign up to be digital champions and to train other people. And many of the councillors, I think, have also offered to do that. And we've, with the ward budgets, I've written out to all councillors to suggest if there are projects in your ward to get people online, that we have a package that's very easy, it's almost set up to go package, plug and play, if you like, package to go out there and be able to train people to get digital skills. Our digital enabling project, which is also looking at the back office functions in the council, is also trying to save us money on more of our services online. We want more joined up working. We don't want people filling in paper forms and then somebody data inputting that paper form at a later date. We want to make sure that we have streamlined processes. We've relaunched the credit union. Very much part of that was also to get it online. I've actually become a member now because I can actually sign up online. I said I would never join until I could sign up online because filling in paper forms, I think, is not the way people want to do that. And I think by doing the credit union, we are online, I think we encourage a lot more residents to sign up and support the credit union and pay into the credit union. But then the other side of that is the credit union can do something very useful with that money. And part of their financial inclusion package is being able to use the credit union to offer short-term loans, to be able to offer the jam jar accounts, offer the bank accounts, etc. So I think it's a virtuous circle of savers supporting residents through that process. Next slide. So our priorities going forward, I think there's a whole lot of work still to do in supporting partners in the community to progress digital training skills. It's part of, I've been pushing it through the Active Communities Fund. We've been trying to find funding for organisations that want to do that. I think it's a key part of what we're trying to do. I think when you're looking at our social isolation strategy, I think digital will be very much part of that. I would like to see greater broadband and Wi-Fi provision across the town. Getting broadband into our social housing, getting Wi-Fi into our parks and into our public spaces would, I think, also be a great benefit to the town and to people into many of the other buildings. We need to use our assets better and more of the online services, make sure that our online services are joined up, easy to use, and the residents find that the best way of accessing services. And there's the whole engagement and communication process that we want to do. We have 100,000 residents that receive our email. At the moment, they get one email essentially a week from us. But we should be breaking that down so people can say, well, actually, I'm interested in, we can target those emails to people in their street if there's planning applications. We can target to people if they're interested in cycling or the environment or the local parks. So actually, we can start getting more engagement with their residents. And the other side of that is actually then using it as a tool for genuine communication with their residents. I think as councillors in the past, we do like to have meetings and think this is the way to engage with people. I think there are other ways we can engage with large numbers of people to get their views, people that we don't often speak to. And I think using digital services as a communication tool is one of the priorities, I think, going further, and how we use digital to shape some of those services going forward. And I think those are the two areas that are not covered really in the next two sections. I don't know, do you want to do questions to the whole portfolio, or do you want to do questions?
Okay, we'll have, we're not going to take questions on the two areas, though the community safety partnership may not, we may take some questions because our priority is more about the effective, we want to monitor the partnership as much as the document. So, so there may be some questions on the nighttime economy that may be in this section now. I want to look around the room. Who wants to go first? Carol?
Thank you, Chair. In your presentation, you flagged up the Gateway service, which I've been to have a look at it. I think it's very impressive. I've referred constituents to it. And clearly it's doing a fantastic job at, being that one point of contact for people who have multiple problems that need resolving. Is it likely that this service will be expanded in the future, or is it, is the fact that it is smaller, does that mean that it actually works better than being, a much larger conglomerate kind of service?
Well, the idea is to expand the work that the Gateway Service team are doing to be able to support people further on. So that's bringing people from different departments together to say, instead of people being pushed from one department, so you have housing dealing with one thing, finance with another, is actually to try to take people on the journey. So we look after people in a more holistic way. So that Gateway services are going to be very much the way we're going to be operating going forward. I mean, particularly as we face some of the challenges, I think, around universal credit and welfare reform.
Looking at the digital go-on services that are provided in Access Croydon in particular, I was just curious to know how many people are actually using Access Croydon to learn how to use computers. I think there's a drop-in every Friday. Is that correct? I don't know if we've got any idea of how many new people are coming to learn how to use computers and go online.
Well, everybody's coming through Access Croydon is it's encouraging to apply for services online, and there are people taking up the digital zones training. I don't know how many roughly that is, but I mean, there's across the borough, there's lots of people taking up the training. I think we could do more on that, but I haven't got the actual figures on top of me. I don't know if I've got any officers here that.
I should point out that at the next meeting on the 12th of April, we are looking in much more in-depth, because you're writing a report for us, I believe, on digital and financial inclusion, rather than the high-level stuff that you've put in your presentation. So that may be a question that we'd like answered at the April meeting.
I've got one more.
Okay.
Looking at expanding the provision of Wi-Fi across the borough, what are the barriers to having a free, Wi-Fi Croydon-wide that anyone can access?
Well, there's a number of barriers. I mean, when we looked at this previously, we had a sort of WiMAX service which would cover the whole borough. You have some competition issues for a start. So, if we were to provide free Wi-Fi for everybody in the borough, I think people like BT and Virgin would say, hang on a minute, that's not very fair for us. So we wouldn't be providing everybody with free Wi-Fi. But I think in our public spaces, you could provide it. It is about the infrastructure, just putting the infrastructure in the spaces. And so when I've spoken to people about trying to get it into the parks, it's all very doable. It's just you need to have units around there and all the rest of it. So it is doable. Getting broadband into social housing is much easier because it can be wired in. But getting Wi-Fi into parks and other spaces is slightly more complicated, but it's not undoable. It's about cost and who's going to provide it and who's going to pay for it is really the key to it. But certainly extending it into our public buildings, having Wi-Fi everywhere is part of that, and then whether you could have that in the town centre as well. And I'm always reminded, if you ever travel overseas and you can't use Wi-Fi because you can't, actually having Wi-Fi when you're in a town somewhere would be very, very useful. So if you're a visitor, certainly an overseas visitor that's not on a contract here, then actually having free Wi-Fi in the town would be a very useful thing. And you could tie that into actually trying to identify places to go, such as the newly revamped Surrey Street and our fantastic nighttime economy, and other places that you could try to include into that. So I think if we are going to do Wi-Fi, then it will be in public spaces or places we go, but it won't be across the whole borough.
And do you have any idea of what the timescale might be for that? I understand there's cost implications and that kind of thing, but do we have a plan, or is it an aspiration?
I think it's aspirational at the moment. I mean, I think we know what we want to do. It's just how we might do that. Now, of course, when we're looking at the redevelopment of Surrey Street, for instance, we might be saying, well, actually, part of that process, let's have Surrey Street Wi-Fi or something. So it could be that's an opportunity to do that. So if we're already doing some work, I think it's something we want to be building in. And I think it's something when we are looking at any new development, we should be thinking very much about how do we incorporate Wi-Fi into that.
I can't remember, I have to say, whether we asked, or in the review of planning documents, whether fibre optic should be a requirement of all new developments, or whether that's allowed or not, because quite a number of builders only put in a very basic broadband system in, and if you've got lots of professionals moving into a building, you can find it very quickly. It is not very effective. What I'm going to do, because I've effectively had a question from the public, from Carlton here, but also I had a question submitted, or we've had a question submitted from Mark Samuels, who's in the right-hand corner, both on a similar issue, which is about the recent press reports. I'll read out Mark's question, and then I'll ask him to do a follow-up, and then I'll bring in Carlton as well.
Before you move on, could I just comment on Croydon? I just wanted to say that CACFO UK has committed to setting up a digital zone in the Northwood Borough. So we had superfast broadband installed today. We've already been testing it on our elders at the site and want to roll it out in the next couple of weeks. We've had a great donation from TalkTalk of tablets, and so this is an absolutely fabulous idea, but it doesn't cost a lot. So I just wanted to stress that. What you need to do is find a way of engaging the public. We've got so many sites, so many charities around Croydon, and if they adopted the CACFO approach, where you just opened up your doors for a couple of hours a week, I think this could go a long way for Croydon.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think if you've got any venues with community groups that have got a venue and they've already got Wi-Fi in, I mean, what you're talking about is getting either laptops or tablets, and part of what we're trying to look at and go on is whether actually tablets are more intuitive for people, whether people will be better off going straight to tablets rather than using a laptop. And I think that both laptops and tablets are incredibly cheap now. I mean, the cost of computing has come down enormously. So actually to set up a project doesn't cost very much at all. We have got partners that will donate both tablets and laptops and software, etc. So, there is a lot of scope to do that. If people have got a space and got somebody willing to do that, then we can set up a lot of these projects very, very easily and very cheaply.
Okay. What I'm going to suggest is that we just follow, let's just do this area first before we move on to the other question. I've got a question on this. There are members of the public who don't believe that the Go On digital is going to make a difference to them, that they believe, and they're looking at themselves, that they are, they don't want to engage, they want to do things traditionally, they want to send letters to the council when they find it hard to make payments because the bank accounts they have set up. I mean, one of the reasons we want to do this work is there's two. One is there's a benefit to the resident, but there's also savings to the council. Will we create a new group of people by this who just don't, who won't want to engage, or there's that other group, as you've just mentioned, the group that may be who are of a generation where the computer revolution passed them by and may be socially isolated as well?
Yes, I think there's two groups of people out there. I think there's those people that are not online who've never had the opportunity to, and perhaps never seen a reason to get online or the opportunity to get online, who actually, if you can engage with them and work through with them, actually, they see the benefits of it. You can get them, they actually see they sit there looking at their foxes, or they find other interests on it, and you get them engaged in it, and you can work with them. I think there are some people out there that just don't want to use it, could use it, but don't want to use it, and that's just a principle. Don't see any use in doing it. Now, that is fine, but the world is moving on, and most services will be going online. Now, whether they're just choosing not to use it, that's up to them if they don't want to engage, and they may not want to engage with other services, but they will find that many other services they do need to engage online at some point or another. And then there are people, I think, that are genuinely left out completely, and how do we engage them? But by freeing up resources, by getting most people to do their services online, that is freeing up resources so we can help with those small number of people. We'll always be able to help those small number of people that need to access services in a different way. But that means we have those resources so we can focus on those that genuinely need help. But those people just say, I don't want to do it. I think we should be pushing those people to go online, because it's costing us money to do it a different way. And I think we need to be clear to people that actually, if we want to provide these services and we want to look after our most vulnerable, then we do need everybody to chip in and play their part in that. So I do think we do want to try and encourage as many people as we can. But I think with the whole Go On project is really to get out into those communities and really find the engagement. And we just can't, I think it's no good just telling people go online because it's good. I think you have to find a reason for people. And I think the whole advantage of the Go On project is sitting down with people and talking to them and actually saying to them, not just saying, look, here's a computer and this is what you do and this is how you go, is actually talk to them about why they might be interested in that. Now, whether that is Arthur in his football club or the guy on the Foxes or somebody else that likes to contact their grandchildren, etc. You find a hook for them to get in. And I think when you find people that they see there's a usefulness to it, they get quite engaged in the process. And then actually reporting a misspin or whatever is no longer a difficulty.
Okay, I'm going to take on as I said, two issues. A question, so a comment from Carlton earlier when you were detained in another meeting, and I've also got a question from Mark Samuel about a press report. I'm just going to read out Mark Samuel's and ask him to make a follow-up question. It says, dear elected councillors, in light of recent reports of possible inappropriate activities by Croydon Borough Police, would it be possible to ask the following public question at the above meeting, please? When will Councillor Mark Watson summon the police borough commander to an open and public meeting of Croydon Council to explain his understanding of the procedure in setting policies for the licensing of premises for the sale of and supply of alcohol and the provision of regulated entertainment in our borough? So, Mark, you've sent that in as a question. You've got anything you want further to add to that?
Good evening. Thank you, committee, for allowing me to be here. Member of the public, obviously, and thank you, Mark Watson. Have you actually summoned the borough commander? I was led to believe he was going to be here at some stage. Seek some clarification on that, please.
I should point out, Mark Samuels, I should say, that this committee is a scrutiny committee, which Mark is here, as has been summoned here himself, to have questions from the public. This is not Mark's committee, this is the Scrutiny Committee. Secondly, Chief Superintendent Andy Tant has sent his apologies for today's meeting. We received it this morning. It may be connected with events happening today, and so that may be the reason why he's unable to make it, unless there's some. But in regards to the question, Carlton, do you want to just follow up with your statement that you made earlier?
Of course. I might just say a little bit more than I said earlier. Race discrimination is one of those subjects which is quite emotional because it's just so inexplicable. Some of you will know that I worked at the Home Office following the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And part of my role was to work on race equality policy. And I headed up parliamentary bill team to amend the Race Relations Act to extend the Race Relations Act to the police so that the anti-discrimination provisions apply to them. And also wrote a public sector duty to promote. And so it's quite painful, really, to see, decade down the track, to see that in my own borough, the police seem to be doing anything but promoting race equality in relation to my ethnic group, and that quite possibly they could be breaching the Race Relations, Equality Act discrimination provisions. So what I was inviting on the back of your comments earlier, Chairman, is that this scrutiny committee takes a long, hard look at the way police are treating the Jamaican community in Croydon, because to racially profile based on the music you like doesn't make any sense. And as I said earlier, it would catch law-abiding people like me who, consider ourselves to be pillars of the community.
So, Mark, you've got some questions. I know you can't summons him to a meeting,
say,
but
you may summon, I can't. I can only ask. But look, we've met with the Borough Commander. We met, and I've had a number of conversations with him since those stories have gone. The reason he's not here today is actually he's got childcare, but there is which he told me beforehand, it wasn't for anything to do today. And I think Paul Ashbury is coming in on behalf of the police later. I think they don't want to get into a conversation on stuff relating to the bar because it will go to licensing at some point anyway. And that's a judicial meeting and we don't want to prejudice the outcome of that. So I don't think they'll want to get into a conversation, particularly on the specifics of that case, until it's been heard at licensing. But we have had conversations with the police, and I've listened to the licensees as well. I think it'd be fair to say that we're trying to mend the relationship between the police and the licensees. I think we need a way of going forward. We have set up from the last scrutiny meeting a steering group to look at the nighttime economy. We will get a meeting together again with the police and licensees around the table to see if we all can come to a way to make sure that we have an enjoyable, vibrant, diverse nighttime economy and evening economy out there. And I think everybody wants that. I think the police want that. I think the licensees want that. And I think we as the council want that. And I think that's where we're heading at the moment.
I understand that you can't mention specific venues, and I'm just referring to this in a general form because the comments that have been made about particular types of music haven't just related to one venue. It's been a comment that's been made across a number of venues to me as well as to other people from different owners and different venue goers. So in a more general sense, do you feel that there is some discrimination within the town centre at the moment? And is that what you are discussing with the Borough Commander and the police and any partnerships that are involved in this, rather than just centring on a particular place? I think,
like I say again, we were trying to work together to take us to a position that's better than where we are at the moment. And I think that's what we all want. I think it's not great for these issues to be played out in the press, and I think it's unfortunate that they are. I think there is, from the licensing point of view, and it's a licensing rule, that there is no blanket ban on any type of music at all, and that's from a licensing position. Now, there have been, I understand, conversations with the police. I don't know all the details of that, with the different venues on that. Some of that, they say venues themselves have asked, had these policies in place. I don't want to get too drawn into that because we haven't got all the details and all the facts haven't come out. But I think going forward, we need to find a better way of managing this. We do need to have the bars and the clubs and the licensees round the table talking to the police, talking with the licensing department to make sure that we're all on the same page going forward. It's not useful for any of us to have these issues played out in the press. I don't think it doesn't good for, it's not good for the licensees, it's not good for the police, it's not good for the rest of our community relations as well.
I accept what you've said, and obviously we want Croydon Town Centre and the whole of Croydon to be open and welcome for everyone, so that everyone, as they have in the past, can come along, enjoy themselves doing whatever it is that they want to do and listening to the types of music they want to listen to. It is something that has become obviously heightened more recently, and I'm pleased to hear that progress is being made and work is being done with the various groups. Is this something that you can bring back to us once there is more detail and more information? Because I think it is of significant interest to a number of people, and it would be good to have it back in a format where it's more considered rather than just necessarily the things that have been in the paper.
I would hope that we can move forward and be in a position where where we can draw a line under this and move forward. And so these issues won't be an issue going forward. That sounds like something out of the thick of it, doesn't it? But I think what I'm trying to say is I want to get to a different position from where we are at the moment on this. I think it's unfortunate the way this has been handled. I think there's a lot of things that have been said that I think are unfortunate. I don't think this does any of us any good. I would like us to hopefully take this as the nadir and actually move forward and get to a better position with the licensees, with the police, and so actually that we can thrash those issues out between the licensing team, between the police and the licensees together in a room in a constructive way, rather than trying to take them out in either formal meetings or into in the press. However, if that doesn't work, then yes, I think there's a role for scrutiny to play in looking at some of these issues.
In your conversations with the police, do you think there is an understanding that, in the unfortunate way that perhaps some of this has come out, the kind of damage and impression that is given to some communities and the need to change some of the way this is done on both sides, inadvertently, advertently, to get to that constructive place that is exactly what will need to be done? Do you think there's that understanding and willingness to move to a more constructive place, both on the police and the other front of the groups that you just mentioned?
Both the leader and myself had a very constructive meeting with the borough commander earlier in the week, and I think we all realise that we've got to be in a better position than where we are now. I think that understanding is that having these things played out in the press is not the way. Doesn't anybody any good. And I think we have to understand that we want to have a vibrant, diverse nighttime and evening economy. There will be issues that come with that, and the bar owners understand some of those issues. They work very hard to try and mitigate and reduce those. I think the police have got a difficult job out there as well, and they need to work. It is how I think that policing is done. I think we've already seen some progress on that. I think we can get in a position where it's better than it is now. I don't think these are unique to Croydon. If you look at some of the MOPAC stuff, I think some of these challenges in other parts of London are there as well, between how do you police the nighttime economy. There is an issue with people getting drunk. That's a general issue, I think, and how do we manage that. But I think the answer to your question is do all the parties think we need to be in a better place? I think if all the parties realise we need to move forward from here, we can't carry on in the way that we've been going, because otherwise we end up in the situation we are at the moment, which is not where we want to be. So I think we all need to realise that there has to be a way of sitting around the table and thrashing out these issues between us all in a very constructive and in a manner that where we're not against each other, that we are all working to the same ends.
I'm going to have to say I disagree with some of you there, Mark. One of them, as I said, Scrutiny looked at this issue because there hadn't been a review of the nighttime economy by the council, or a review of a strategy for many, many years. And in a sense, the view was that in a sense the council and everyone has sort of drifted to a position where market forces has changed considerably in terms of the nighttime economy, but also there has been discontent for a while. And I think it's not just Croydon that there's a discontent, because if you read the press in Lambeth, similar comments were made there about closure of venues that catered particularly to the Black and BME communities. I mean, I think if you read the comments about the closing of the fridge and their view about what the police were doing, they echo some of the issues that were mentioned in Croydon. So I do think the point made by Carlton about about race equality, this wouldn't have played out if it hadn't been come to a forum and scrutiny and then in the press, because I think there's been a lack of public discussion, which is one of the reasons why we recommended as a committee to have a forum for all parties in regards to the nighttime economy, and why we also recommended that we should have a cabinet member to take overall responsibility. And so, we are keen to see that taken forward. But we are not the cabinet members. We are scrutiny. We are allowed to ask difficult questions. And I think, personally, it's something that I think we will be looking at, because I think the whole issue of licensing and race equality is an interesting area for us to look at, because it needs to be tested. Because people are saying things are going to change, or things are not as bad as it may be presented in the press. But at this moment in time, that is untested, the statements that have just been said to us. And I think it's our duty as a committee, where a group of people have expressed a concern, that we should look at it to see whether we can either test its validity or make some recommendations to improve it. I'm not asking you to come back on that, but I'm just sort of saying...
Well, I think that's right, and I think it's just, I think at the moment, I think because there's the complication of one of the bars involved very much in the public spec is coming up for the a review, I think it's difficult to get all the facts here. I think as a role of scrutiny might be after that has happened, there may be a way where we get people in and actually talk to them, because at the moment, you've got me, but actually there are bar owners out there you might want to hear to. You also want to hear from the police as well, because I'm not going to be here defending the police. In my view is the police haven't handled this particularly well either. I think that it's unfortunate where we've got the position we've got because of the way it's been handled. I think we would really want to try and get to a position where we don't have these things in the press. So I think going forward, we have to find a better way of working. Now, maybe there's a role for scrutiny to look into some of those issues later, but I would think until this particular issue is dealt with by the licensing committee, I don't think it's appropriate to get too drawn into the details, because I don't think you can have a detail about the issue without talking about the bar particularly, because it's central.
Okay, Mark and Carter, both you come back just quickly, because I want to move this on, because it's likely that we will come back to that subject again.
Could we just have some further clarification? Is it the police that sets the licensing policy, or is it the duly elected councillors of this borough that do so?
I can answer that. We set the policy. It may be an issue about how it's enacted.
I just wanted to say that it's the Jamaican community that's suffering from this police action. And I just wanted to ask whether you've actually got any Jamaicans on the inside as part of these ongoing discussions, because we understand, a lot of people say to me, what is bashment? Most people didn't even know until they read the article. And then my supplementary question is, sorry, I should say that if you could have someone on the inside, I think the discussions would go a lot easier, and that was my discovery, again, working on race equality policy. If you've got people affected in the room, quite often the discussions are different. And then my second point would be around what lies behind some of these issues. I wouldn't just look at the fact that licensing has gone wrong in this particular instance. I think you'd look for the driver. What drove the police to take these particular decisions? It may be that they got a legitimate answer, but it may be that they don't.
And that's why a review would give us a chance to test that assertion. And, Carlton, we may be phoning you or calling you sometime soon. I'm just going to get through some other items of your portfolio before we go on to the other two items. Reading on page 24, your list of responsibilities. Number 9, so I'm just going to ask you to oversight of the development, implementation, monitoring, review of the Council communication strategy. Then you've got promotion of the Croydon brand image. I didn't realise that you were Mr. Croydon. So again, I'd be interested to know whether you wander around with Croydon written across your back or something like that, like some sort of football player, or I don't know. And number 12, which is oversight of the effective and efficient management and use of resources allocated by the Council to the various departments covered by the business portfolio and their performance in respect of continuous improvement and delivery of the Ambitious for Croydon Manifesto programme. So I'd all of them, I'd be quite interested to know what they actually mean. I didn't write this, so can you give us some insight?
The communication strategies really is how we are communicating with our residents. I mean, there's the whole communications department. That includes the deco posters. It includes the emails and the Twitter feeds, etc. that we do. Partly the webcasting of meetings that sits under my responsibility. So I think there's a whole range of what the communications is. I think. And there's sort of general communications that go out. I think the bit that I've been pushing on this is how do we have effective engagement with residents. So my big push really is that, one, to get the York Croydon Weekly out, which we've done. That goes now out to about 100,000 people. That's a way of getting communications directly out to many of our residents. That needs to be improved. That needs to be more targeted, I think, going forward, so we can break that down, so we can get more targeted messages to people when they want them. And the other side of that is that whole engagement platform, the Get Involved platform that we've set up. How do we start using the communications as a two-way communication? How do we get people engaging with us in a more realistic way that they can feed back to us? And I think so that part of the portfolio is all what I'm doing. The Croydon brand, I don't look. The work we're doing around the image stuff, and particularly within the Safer Partnership, is looking at things like the perceptions of Croydon. How do we, Croydon's overall perception, how do we change some of that? What work can we do to move some of those issues on, the whole fear of crime stuff and perceptions around crime we've been doing. So I think that when we're talking about Croydon brand, it's really about the image of Croydon. How do we start changing the image? And I know everybody wants to do that, and everybody would say they're trying to do that. It's hard work to do that, but there are ways that we can start moving that forward. And I think already with some of the stuff around the growth is all of a sudden Croydon's becoming, an up-and-coming place. There's people want to invest here, and I think that is part of the narrative that gets out there. And I think more we can get the stories out about the exciting things that are happening in Croydon, things even from the beer festival that happened at the weekend to the work we will do on Surrey Street, etc. will all start, and Box Park actually starts changing the image and the brand of Croydon, I think. So that work on that.
Okay, so
what's the oversight of the effectiveness?
I'm assuming that somewhere in there it's you've got to deliver certain parts of the manifesto.
Yeah, a lot of it is on the digital stuff as well. How do we effectively start reusing resources? How do we improve all departments to become better working together rather than in silos? How do we get more of our departments doing digital themselves? All that work. How do we get rid of all this paper stuff and have digital stuff as part of that work?
Okay, so my final question before I bring in Sherwin is Surrey Street, £500,000. Where did it come from? What's it made out of? I mean, you know, why £500,000?
The work on Surrey Street actually came out, obviously, so from the licensing point of view, Surrey Street fits under my portfolio, and we've been talking with the traders down there for some time, and Roy, the market manager, and Fiona down there, had lots of conversations with them. How could we improve the market? And it's been one of our things for a long time is that we've got quite a good fruit and veg market. It's half-hearted. It's only half the market is being used. There's not much else down there. There could be so much more for it. It's a great street down there. So actually the conversation came out from how can we improve it for traders. And part of that was actually better stalls. So we had more uniform stalls, better pitches for people. So it looked a little bit less tatty as it does at the moment. So that's where that first, so I was trying to get some money to get some stalls, how we would improve that area. And then Moy did a piece of work some time ago about talking to traders about what they would like to see down there. And he costed up some of the improvements that the traders wanted, come out at just under 500,000. And so we've managed to get that from the capital programme to improve Surrey Street. Other parts of the town have had investment. I think Surrey Street could be the jewel in the crown of Croydon. I think if it done correctly and right, it could be a very busy and thriving market. Not lose what we've got out at the moment, but improve what we've got. We could have a great evening offering down there, which could be stalls, pop-ups, etc. It could be a Sunday market down there, perhaps a farmer's market, etc. But also, if you start improving the area, you can actually see a couple of little bars and tappers bars, other things. You go to Clapham, there's lots of these little bars that open out there. The bit we've always said in Croydon, you come out in Croydon, you go out for a restaurant, you go to the restaurant, you sit down, you have your meal, you get up and you go home again. There isn't, you don't, I know you say you come out and wander around and go to places, but we don't have a big crowd of people doing that. People don't say, I'm just going to go into Croydon and see what happens.
So, Mark,
yeah.
And I know you're enthusiastic about it, but going back to this £500,000, what does that mean in terms of, say, I think it's a crying shame that somehow we managed to do up all the pavements and streets around Surrey Street, and for some reason Surrey Street was never done. Will it mean, that we'll actually have some decent pavings and road in Surrey Street?
Well, the idea is probably not to have paving. We have got a group set up, so we want to engage with the traders. We've had one meeting with traders and residents already. I've got a follow-up meeting on the 4th of April with some local residents and traders about what the people want. I think we'll go back out when we've got some ideas and costed them up what that could be. But I think we probably want to get rid of the pavements altogether, so right across, maybe pedestrianised. Not quite cobbles, but I think it should be something a bit interesting. One of the images I had was all brightly coloured gold and ruby encrusted things. We're probably not going to have the gold and ruby encrusted pavements, but we could have something interesting on the pavement. And then we want some better lighting down there. We want some good stalls. I mean, improve some of the shop fronts. I mean, 500,000 doesn't go very far, and I think we need to work out what we can do. But it would be getting rid of the pavements, because the pavements are bad for the traders at the moment, because stalls are up and down. It's bad for people with wheelchairs and pushchairs at the moment, because it's difficult to get up and down the pavements. So I think having it right across would be better for the traders. Maybe have the stalls in the middle, so it opens up those shop fronts down the side as well. Chairs and tables in the middle. So I think there's a lot that could be done there with the 500,000. But we've got to be realistic. It's not going to do. I mean, some people have asked for it to be completely covered. But that I think would be a different project. That's not going to happen in this project. It is going to be improving the roadway. It is about improving shop fronts. It's improving the lighting. It's improving the stalls. Some better signage to the market. That's the sort of thing I think that's going to come out of it. They were the main ideas that came out of the meeting at the conference centre. Essentially, you're not going to do much more than that with the 500,000 anyway.
I mean, personally, I saw in Tatchbrook Street Market when Westminster refurbished Tatchbrook Street a few years ago and took out the pavements and made it. It did make the market feel a nicer place. And that certainly allowed an expansion of the market, because that market had been dying. But for me, the issue would be that it still retains what it does provide, which is, a fruit and veg and market that caters for all, but particularly for people whose money doesn't go very far and still want to buy fruit and veg from a stallholder. We're not going to lose that from the market.
I've been very clear that I want to keep what we've got down there, and I think the fruit, I go and buy all my own fruit and veg down the market, so I want to keep that, declare an interest in that, because I like shopping in the market. So I think we want to keep that part during the week down. I think we've got that established. We could improve that, I think, during the week. I think in the evening you could see more food stalls going up. I think there was an opportunity on the Sunday that you could have a more farmers market type market for a little bit, for a different type of produce out there. So I think there's an opportunity to do that, but without losing what we've got on a weekday market. So I think we're very clear. We want to keep the existing traders there. We want to keep what we've got. I think we want more holders in. But that market that we've got at the moment is great. We just need to improve it. And I think there is an opportunity for a different type of market, perhaps on a Sunday or in the evening, other stalls as well.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go to my question, I think you can expand this markets towards Rips Corner, where more traders can join in and different food and what you are saying. Okay. Well, my question is in regards to local support. You got sort of people are servicing from one different angle to one center, which is like in regards to local, universal credit, welfare reform and other, and multiple service, which is one stop, which is benefiting, is really good, and you got a lot of statistics as well. Have you got any sort of analysis like how much you are saving accumulated saving for all peoples, which is really good? Because if you have a different people goes different services, which is cost more money, and if one person can advise, do how to prevent homelessness, helping in the benefit as well as, for children in school as well. So, I think it is good, we can expand in future for giving the benefit to the people.
Yes, I haven't got a figure at the top of my head, but the whole point of this is to save money, but also to improve the life chances of those people that come through the service. So getting people into work. Some people have not, some of the people we've been helping have not been in work before. Getting them into work actually eases their position on their benefits quite a lot. So instead of just saying to people, go off and you've got to get a job, otherwise you're not going to get benefit, we help them through that process, and I think that we've seen lots of benefits from getting those people into employment, helping people through that process. So there's lots of savings, I think, for the individuals, obviously helping them for them. But I think there's also savings for us as a council, because there's a lot of these families cost us money. If they go into temporary accommodation, that costs more. We want to try and intervene at the earliest stage possible, because that's the cheapest time for us to deal with them. If they go further down the process, it becomes more and more expensive for us and more chaotic for them. So intervening early and appropriately is very much the purpose of the gateway service.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. But of course, I'm not talking about in terms of council saving, but people can saving, which is it will be interested for other people. Yes, if you can go there, you can save money, you can, that sort of things would be, that's good. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and that's the process is very much to try and help people with their budget going through their expenditure and actually saying to people, well, actually, if you
thank
did
you,
it like this.
Thank you. If you're both agreeing with each other, then that's good. Mario.
Thank you. In one of your documents about your achievements, you've said that one of them is the Eyes and Ears rollout. Could you explain what Eyes and Ears is to people here?
The Eyes and Ears project is the enforcement teams, how we get the people out on the street and trying to make sure that when people are out there, that officers can, if one officer's out there, they can see something that's happened, they can report it back. A better way of combining those teams, more efficient way of using officers when they're out there, Part of that process now will be with mobile, so that those enforcement officers don't have to come back to the office. They can actually access services through their mobile technology, and I think is that out working now properly as well?
Hopefully in the next month or so.
Okay, so that will make a big difference, and if you look at the savings we've made around that Eyes and Ears project, a lot of that is actually because of the better way of working, combining teams, using the mobile technology, improving the efficiency of officers when they're out and about. So really, they're the eyes and ears of the council.
Thank you very much. Sort of follows on for my next question, that your cabinet paper last year said that it was an integral part of your Ambitious for Croydon policies. And in the budget, it did say it was being cut by around about 735,000 with community services. Do you not believe that will have a negative impact on all of the things that you've just described?
It didn't actually say a cut, it said a saving. The savings can come from reducing services or increasing fees. So you could also, some of those savings are from increased licensing fees, etc. So some of those savings are made from increasing fees. So it's not all cut from the service. But some of those efficiencies are made by combining the services. The mobile technology will also make the service more efficient. So actually the impact for residents will be lessened, but the efficiency for the teams will be, again, we had to make some, all departments have had to make some savings, but some of those savings are not actually cuts, they're actually increasing in revenue, and some of it is through more efficient working. We're not making any redundancies in the Eyes and Ears team, so going forward, those savings are done through natural wastage or through more efficient ways of using the service.
So for a bit more clarity, how much have the fees increased by that have been able to fund this service, and where have they come from? And a second logical question is, of the 725,000, how much of that is through efficiencies?
I haven't got the exact figures in front of me, but roughly you are looking at income of around about £200,000, which is made up of a number of different areas. Part of that is through FPN, so fixed penalty notices for various things. Part of it will be through licence fee income as well. Okay. In terms of the remainder, that has been taken from largely Eyes and Ears has been delivered over two phases. Phase one was predominantly a kind of a management reshuffle. So we've changed the management structure. We've put it under my division, so it's kind of my team effectively. And have changed the number of managers and the remit that those managers have. So a lot of the savings in phase one have been done through taking out management posts. Phase two is more about operational delivery, and that's what primarily is being delivered in 16-17. And that is a combination of that income that I've just referred to, but it's also the efficiencies that Mark has outlined in terms of mobile working, and trying to avoid duplication within various enforcement teams. Okay.
So you've said that there have been some posts that have been removed. And Mark, you said 30 seconds earlier, we have not had any staff lost as a result of these cuts. Have I misunderstood something?
They're vacant posts. So there's been no compulsory redundancies in either phase one or phase two. So they're either vacant posts or people that have voluntarily left the council through the TVS scheme.
Are any of those people that are they going to be refilled, those positions? Because if not, isn't that a reduction in staff number?
There is an overall reduction in the numbers of staff, yes. But we believe that through the efficiencies and the transformation that we're going through, there won't be any loss of productivity.
It's better ways of working, more efficient ways of working. So there'll be fewer staff, better ways of working, but no compulsory redundancies.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just wanted to ask about two perennial subjects, which I think are close to our hearts, sadly, all the time, as I say. Domestic violence, domestic abuse services, basically, and secondly, human trafficking. Is there an update or any comments you'd like to make on those two areas, please?
Richard, I think those two, we may be covering them partly under the under the next paper, so we'll take a note of them. Or next two papers.
I'm not going to ask a question. I just really wanted to make a point tonight about the Gateway team. I've had a lot of engagement with them in my other role, and they are an exceptionally good team. You know, they're doing some fantastic work, and I just really wanted to put it on record how grateful I am for the support that they've given people that I've put in contact with them, because it has made a difference. They don't shy away from telling someone, actually, you've got to make a change to your life, which is a hard thing to do, and they've done it very well. So I just really want to put on record my thanks to them.
I would say that, and then Mark Fowler particularly is the head of that team, is doing an excellent job. And there are tough decisions to make with people, and it's whatever we think of the welfare cuts, people have got to go through them. People have got to deal with the reality in front of them, and that is going through people, saying to some people, you've got to go and get a job. You've got to get 16 hours a week job to be able to do that. You've got to be able to cut some of your benefit. These are the choices of where you might want to do, and it is helping people through it. But I think that what they're doing is being tough, but actually getting people through a process. And actually, they found pretty much everybody that they've engaged with, obviously it's different levels of engagement at first, but actually it's been a positive experience in most of those cases, and actually working with people through the process and treating people as human beings through it, and not passing them from one department to another. So I think it is worth mentioning that the team there are doing a tough job in difficult circumstances, but doing it very well. And it has, as I say, nationally, the Select Committee came down here. All right, well, look, it's worth saying again, they're doing a very good job.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We're going to close that item now to move on to the Stronger Communities Partnership. How we're going to take this is, obviously, I've got, you're here, Sarah and Sharon, you've got a presentation, which I think has been led by you. And what I'll do then is I'll then ask the other people here, one, to introduce themselves, but also to comment both on the partnership, but also on the Active Communities Fund, which was something that we looked at last year, and now that we're 1 year into the project, it's good to get some feedback from the participants. So those people who are here, Sylvia, Dorothy and Tony, we'll ask when you're introducing yourself to just give some comments on the Active Community Fund as well. So in the first case, we're going to have the presentation. If you want to start.
We've got the first. Okay, the Stronger Communities Board and the Active Communities Fund. So the board was established in November 2014 to coordinate policy and practice for the communities, supports the council through the Obligations and Equality Act. We've met 5 times already, and we've discussed issues from the Opportunity and Fairness Commission, issues around stop and search, preventing extremism, the whole new Stronger Communities plan, and the new Community Fund. It's still a relatively new board. I think I think it's an ever-evolving board. I think the meetings are well attended, and I think the engagement is very good. And I think probably we could look at ways of improving as we go forward. Next slide. Again, I'm not going to read out all of these, but we very much was contributed into the Opportunity and Fairness Commission and engagement around that. We've done a whole range of different events to improve community relations, promoting the different faith events, Diwali, Eid, etc. The big lunches, trying to get those out across the borough. They've been a huge success. And if anybody's ever heard me talk before, I'm a big fan of the big lunches. I think they're a great way for residents to connect with each other. But if you're looking at dealing with issues like social isolation, community cohesion, that they are fantastic. I always say the one in my street, I met more people at Big Lunch than I did from after 10 years of knocking on their door. So they are I think, a fantastic initiative. We celebrate things like Black History Month, Holocaust Memorial Day, etc. The craft beer came out of the community group there and was supported by the community's team. And then the interfaith celebrations and the London Mode Carnival. We had a very successful meeting with all the festival organisers recently as well. We've looking at the commissioning arrangements with the voluntary sector. Next slide. Working with the CVA and the development of the big local initiative for Broad Green, and again a very great example of communities coming together there to work on a project. I attended their last meeting they had on that, and we're trying to get the governance in place. The community ward budgets, I think, came out of the community work, and I think giving the money to the ward councillors to be able to spend on ward projects, things like the big lunches, etc. For many other projects, community in my ward, we funded things like community orchards, friends groups, etc. I think giving councillors a role to fund projects that they believe are useful in their ward, I think is a fantastic initiative and builds on the sort of bottom-up approach to community engagement. We've had a number of meetings with the Muslim community, and I've been around the mosques, and we've done a number of walkabouts around there and gone to different mosques and talked to both the leaders in there, but also the worshippers there. We've done a whole work with the police, going out and talking to residents out on the street, and I think the walkabouts have been a great success. In just going out, and again we have meetings quite often. We expect people to come to meetings and tell us things. Is actually you get a very different perspective if you go out and walk around the streets and talk to people. We went up and down London Road, talked to all the shopkeepers. We've been around to Wadham, Norbury, etc. And I think they're very new, Addington and Fieldway, and I think they're a great way of just getting out there and meeting the community in circumstances other than council meetings. Next slide. So we need to, as I said, the board is still fairly new. I think we need to look at the membership and subgroups. We need to develop a community's plan going forward. Look at different areas that we want to do work. I mean, how do we engage more people in volunteering? We have a very good volunteering bureau. How can we improve that? How can we get volunteering into doing some of the work that the council needs to be looking at as well? So I think there's a whole bit of work that how we get more volunteering done. How our interfaith activities work. At the moment we put on a lot of, or support putting on interfaith activities. I'm not sure how interfaith they often are, and I think that's something we want to look at. How can we get more actual interfaith activities going on? I think the interfaith bike ride that they had last year, I think was a fantastic event, and I think we need more events like that where people are actually talking to each other. We want to, I think the other big thing that the board could be doing is how do we get external funding into the borough? I think we don't do as much as we could on that. And then we need a whole community cohesion group to look at, particularly around the issues of hate crime, etc. Next slide. The Active Communities Fund, I'm a big fan of the Active Communities Fund. I think it's a fund that funds small projects for small organisations doing some really valuable work. And I've met many of the organisations that have benefited from the fund. Things just wouldn't have happened for the sake of £1,000, £2,000, etc. I think the reach out there is very varied. I think there's more we could do on the fund. Next slide. So I think, at the moment, I don't think the fund is working well either for us as a council or for the community. I think the lead-in for applications is too long. People talk about the application process being too lengthy and complex, although when we're assessing some of the applications, I think some of the information we need is not there. And we're not reaching as many innovative ideas. I think there must be more ideas in a borough of nearly 400,000 people and a very active and diverse community sector. Some of the projects that come forward are not what I would have expected to come forward. So I don't think we're reaching the right people to apply for that funds. So I'm very keen that we keep the Active Communities Fund, but I do think we need to look at trying to make it more effective. Next, is there any more? So these are some things we're just looking at. Having one application so we don't have the micro grants fund and the active communities fund. I would think having a sifting process and then maybe having people come in and actually telling us about their projects will be more effective than people trying to write down. I think quite often when people write down their projects, they miss out most of the important things. I think also it's very difficult for us if we have questions to actually be able to drill down in that when we've just got a paper application. So I think that's the way forward. I think most people will agree that the fund does a valuable job. We just need to make the way people apply for it better. We need to maybe have a monthly application process so people are not waiting for so long for funding and can apply in a shorter space of time, and make it easier for people to apply, and make it easier for us to understand what they're trying to achieve, and make it easier for new projects to apply for the fund. That's it.
Thank you, Mark, for that quick run-through. As I said, I'm going to ask, as much we go around the table, or start at the back, in terms of just to comment, to introduce yourself and to make any comments either to the presentation or to the Active Community Fund or to the partnership. So I don't know who would like to go first. Who wants to be the first one? Is that turn? Okay, Carton then. Then we can go around in order.
Sorry. Chairman of Croydon African Caribbean Family Organisation, and sit on the Stronger Communities Partnership Board in that capacity. I would fully agree with Councillor Watson that the board works well, has a good mix from across Croydon, and the programme of activities we have at present, I think, are the right ones. The Active Community Fund, I mean, I was involved in looking at that with one of the officers on behalf of the board, and I agree it could be faster. And I think, that some of the ideas that come out of the board are the right ones. We can make that happen. Some of the ideas, well, I don't know how you generate new ideas, but I think the best way to maximise the good ideas that come through are to actually promote the fund better. I'm not sure that everyone, all the organisations out there know about it. And one of the ways we were discussing with officers of doing that is, like my festival, Thornton Heath Festival, we were awarded £3,000 last year. But actually the council got nothing back from us other than the festival. I think we could have done much more to put signage about the fund on the stage, in our programme. You get 8,000 people going through there. And it would just be a great way of being able to give something back for the gift that was given to us.
Hello, my name's Mumtaz Hassan. I'm from South Nord Islamic Centre, and I'm also one of the members of the Stronger Communities Board. Just my comments on the presentation. Yes, I also agree that the Stronger Communities Board has made a great start in terms of pulling together key leaders from our diverse community to come around the table and to identify what our challenges are as a community, and we've got a good action plan there that we're working through. Just I'd add 2 points in terms of what our opportunities or challenges are. I think, firstly, we need to try to encourage more. The meetings, we've had 5 meetings so far, and it would be much more beneficial if we could encourage the leaders, the members of this group to meet offline more in subgroups, to develop further, and to go deeper on the key issues, so that we can, make much more faster progress. It's not just to rely on the 5 meetings and the actions coming out there is not sufficient. That's the first point. And the second is how, and building on Councillor Mark's point about interfaith, how interfaith are our events. I think the key challenge is how can we engage more young people in the work that we're doing across the borough. And the council quite rightly mentioned a great example. The bike ride was a great success, and it was designed in that sense. I mean, in the past, in previous years, we've had a big lunch in Lloyd's Park, but essentially, senior members of the community attending them events by introducing the bike ride, bringing some excitement into the whole activity. It's really about engaging young people, and I think we are doing more of that. For example, we had a seminar on preventing extremism, and following on from that, one of the members from the Muslim Contact Unit at the Metropolitan Police, he went to Croydon College and did a seminar there, and that was fantastic and really well received by the students at Croydon College. So it's more of this type of activity, looking for opportunities where we can engage more young people. We've got an interfaith football tournament being organised next month, and that's been sponsored by Crystal Palace. So this is the type of activity that we need to really build on more, so that we can really get more involvement from the young generation.
Thank you, Mumtaz.
Yes, good evening. My name is Sylvia Wachuku King, and I'm the project manager and founder of Wellbeing U, which is basically to help over 65 and their families to take more responsibility for their health and well-being. My project, I promise you, will be innovative. It's going to be the first time, my first experience with the fund. 4 years ago, with the help of Health Watch, I developed this GP partnership tool, which was to help the over 60s and people to get into strong partnership with the GPs, because at the time the concern was that a lot of the older people were finding it very difficult to communicate with their GPs, very difficult to prepare for their appointments. And so I thought, well, health is wealth. For health, it's a partnership. We need the GPs need us. So one way in which we can do this is to support people to actually work better with their clinicians. So when I apply for funding, I'll be trying to take forward this booklet. My project will be smart. It will sit within the outcomes-based commissioning for over 65 and the new model of care, which is actually going to be supporting older people to, develop their plans, their life plans. And I will also support them and their families to understand what it means to take responsibility. We say, yes, we want people to be proactive, but what really are we expecting from them? And we'll try to give them support. And with that kind of support, the community will be stronger, because health is number one. Health and well-being, you need it for you to be able to get all the other things moving. So, I will be applying for the fund, and I hope this time next year I'll be telling you about my experiences. Thank you very much.
I think that's... oh, sorry, Steve, I forgot about...
I'll try and be brief. I think you've just heard that... Sorry. You've heard from Sylvia an example of a good project, and I think Councillor Watson's right. There's just a discrepancy at the moment between how the fund is being used to reach and find those most innovative projects in the borough. And as Carlton said, be very happy to support the council in the reform of the fund. I think, as Mumtaz said, we can be even more successful in the next 2 years with this partnership. And the obvious landmark for us is the Opportunities and Fairness Commission and its report. And wouldn't it be fantastic if in 2 years' time we're still talking about opportunities and fairness and that report, because they do have a tendency to disappear, these sort of landmark events. But it has been said that it's the impetus for the partnership, and I'd just like to touch on 3 areas where I think, building on what the Opportunity and Fairness Commission have done, we can really take the partnership to the next level. The first one, you'll not be surprised to hear, is about the voluntary sector and how we create this environment for a thriving voluntary sector. We've talked a lot about funding, and of course that is always the most urgent issue for organisations. But to be more strategic on this partnership, the whole question of public service reform and how voluntary and community organisations can do things differently, I think we can explore even more through this partnership. Commissioning has been mentioned, and I think there's more to be done in terms of the whole social value agenda in Croydon. External funding. We've really got to look in this borough at what the opportunities are for us to access external funding. There are certain areas where we haven't been successful, and the most obvious reason for that is that the bids that are going forward don't represent an alignment with what the funder is looking for, what the priorities are. Now, again, this comes to the sort of art of writing bids, but I think we've got an opportunity in the partnership to look at what priorities are being set by the council, what we're good at in the borough, and we can target our bids working in partnership, bringing all the groups that we've got, not just represented on this partnership, but in the wider sector, together in really quality bids. So I'm looking forward to the external funding group that Sarah is chairing, and us being able in a year's time, again, to say, look at what we've done through that group. I think there's an identity crisis around community cohesion. There's things going on at Stronger Communities, things going on at Safer Croydon. I feel we benefit by clarifying exactly what we're looking for each partnership. And with issues like stop and search and hate crime, they just feel to me like Safer Croydon issues. What feels to me like a Stronger Communities agenda is the broad issue of community cohesion. And again, picking up on some of the things that actually the Opportunity Fairness Commission didn't say much about, and my understanding is because they felt, well, these are already established agendas. But the central question of equalities in this borough, we had the discussion earlier on. What I heard Carlton say was that actually when things like this happen, there are other issues, underpinning issues, that they demand that we look more strategically at. And I think we've got a strategy waiting to be written here, which can also focus on all of the very positive things that are going on in the community that, again, Mumtaz referred to. If we think about Big Local that Councillor Watson mentioned, there is a big focus already on young people. So we've got an Afghan learning centre that's been set up, and it's already signposting. It's predominantly young men, I have to say. But they're signposting their clients to other organisations on the London Road. We've got the football going on Sundays at Canterbury Road now, which if you go along, you'll see every community represented there. So community cohesion is my second theme. The last one is community development, more generally. We haven't talked much about the asset-based projects going on in the borough at the moment, but there's a wealth of them, and I think we could benefit from bringing our really innovative work around community development together. It does present a slightly different side to the one that Solomon actually brought out in the annual report that you have in front of you, which, shows a lot of great work going on. This sounds pejorative, but it does look at people in a rather passive way, in some respects, responding to issues, What we've got in this borough is an incredibly proactive community that is doing not just the big lunches, but really innovative stuff in GP surgeries to get people to manage their own behaviours, to be self-sustaining. I think with the Stronger Communities Partnership, we can, as I say, put a bit more of a framework around that and look at how we can roll it out even more widely across the borough.
Thank you very much. Sounds like you guys are doing a lot of great work, and a quick plug for my own big lunch, 12th of June, Surrey Street Market. Everyone welcome. In the presentation, the board has said that it has met 5 times to discuss some quite complicated issues. One of the issues that it talks about is, as you mentioned, stop and search. And I've just had a quick look at some of the figures, and there has been a consistent number of stop and searches pretty much over the last few years, around about 400 a month. And that has led to about 20% have been arrested. So my question really initially is, from the Strong Communities Board, what was the result of the subjects that include stop and search? And do you believe it's actually having any impact whatsoever on what's happening in Croydon?
Yeah, well, we had a very useful meeting, and we wanted to try and get. We didn't get as many young people to the meeting as we would have hoped to get that, and I think it's stop and searches as predominantly, young, impacting younger people. I think it was useful that the police, I think the police are getting on the same side as everybody else. We all want the same outcomes, and they understand. And then the conversations I've had with the police is that they know that if they use the stop and search tool in a way that it doesn't work, then actually that tool will be taken away from them. So I think there's a real understanding on how that works. I think a lot of it is understanding how it is, not so much stop and search itself, it's how it's done. And I think there's been a lot of movement on within the police on how that's done. I think there's been a lot of work with young people to talk to them about their rights when they get stopped and searched as well, so people understand that process. So it was a useful meeting. I think it was a first step meeting. I think there's still more to be done on that. But I don't think stop and search is not the same issue as it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago in that sense. So I think there has been some movement on the issue, and I think it's actually getting people around the table and understanding both sides why people do the stop and search, why young people are stopped and searched with that. I think the advent of some of the body-worn cameras, I think, has been a useful measure with that. I think that has helped things. So I don't know if there's anything else. Did anybody else want to say anything on that?
Evening, apologies for my late entrance. Paul Asprey, Deputy Borough Commander at Croydon Police Station. Councillor Watson's actually right. Croydon as a borough, if we take it 18 months ago, we were #1 in London for knife crime. So we knew from the reports we were having and from the incidences that people were carrying knives. The fear of crime is driven by the elderly, but in reality it's the youths who are actually generally the victims of crime. I'm pleased to say we're about 18th and 19th in London now out of 32 boroughs. So we've seen a marked reduction in knife crime. Yes, some of that is driven by stop and search. A lot of it's driven by education in the schools and support from the people engaged in the meetings we just touched upon. And Croydon, actually, we fare very well in London for stop and search. We're in the top third. So proportionately, or rather positive outcomes, relative to stop and searches, we're doing really well compared with some of our peer boroughs that are sort of busier in the London boroughs. So from a policing perspective, it's a very delicate subject, and only today, obviously, we've all heard what's happened in Belgium. There's heightened security, heightened tensions, but it's about us having legitimacy and public support, and Councillor Watson's right, communicating to the public, if we're going to stop them, what the grounds are and why they're doing it. I think sometimes we perhaps don't do that. Unfortunately we don't. We should do, but we are improving, we're getting better, and we're one of the more positive boroughs.
It's good to hear that there's that it's a priority for the group, but specifically with the Strong Communities Board, what was discussed at the meeting? What was the what was the resolution? How do these discussions actually lead to anything? Is it just, Mark, go and have a conversation with the borough commander? Is it, council officers, can we do this? What is the formal structure of these boards? So when they're discussing preventing extremism, that it has a tangible impact on the policy of the police, the policy of the community, the policy of the borough. How does it actually have an impact?
Well, I'll ask Sharon to come in a minute, but it came from the community concerns, and I think we brought it to the community board. There was a good meeting on that, so the community could come together and raise their issues. The police also attended that meeting, so I think there was a report done from that, and that report then went on to the Safer Communities Board as well. So it was brought back to that board. So I think that it did actually have a process. There was a process of saying, here was some community response, let's bring that back to the Safer board as well, so that that board could then consider the response of the community. And I think it's bringing the two parts of those together, those two boards together, was a very useful way of trying to understand what the community issues were against the sort of safety issues around the board. So it does bring something again. Of course, all the other part of that is actually also bringing back to the community some of the issues that Paul has just highlighted about, how can stop and search be improved? How can we look at that better? What are the issues there? And it's not necessarily about, as I say, about the stopping and searching, it's around the communications, how we manage that. So I think all the work that we do within the board is actually improving that communication and the understanding of the issues is useful. Now, the police don't always get it right, and the community don't always get it right, but I think actually getting that dialogue together and feeding it in from one board to the other was a very useful process. Sharon, is there anything you want to...
Could I just say, I was at that discussion, and I've sat through countless discussions really around stop and search when I worked in Whitehall, where we had assistant commissioners discussing what the issues were. And they haven't really changed over the years, but I think things have got better. I think what the community would say, to go back to the board meeting, what we were able to do as members of the community was to challenge the police, talk about their tactics, what's the reason. And what we concluded from my recollection, after a lot of challenge, was that there are issues around knife crime. No one's going to, deny the police the opportunity to search one if they think they've got knives and they're threats to the community. But the real issue is how it's conducted, and that's the point that Councillor Mark Watson made. So we're supportive, provided it's done properly.
And also, anything where we get the community talking to the police on these issues is a very useful thing. And there was a lot of pushback on the police on that. And I thought it was a useful meeting to just get people in the room to start talking about that, so the police can actually feel what are the issues from the community perspective. So actually, having those meetings, just having people talking to each other, is a very good step.
Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions about the Active Communities Fund. Well, active community is a very broad word, and community does a lot of good work within themselves without money. Some they get money as well, but it's really as long as they get encouraged and get supportive. But in regards to application for funding, if somebody asks for £500, one of the small group, and if you ask for a business plan, they're not going to ever apply for the funding. So I think the application should be fairer and simpler, maybe in 2 pages, and maybe you can engage local councillor or anybody who can give a sort of reference, so everybody can have a fairer share to do something with the community in maybe £500 or £1,000, whatever. It depends on the project.
No, you're absolutely right. And then we had the micro fund for funds up to £1,000. And I sat on we had the board on that this week. And the application was very simple. It's like, how much money do you want and what do you want to spend it on? I mean, the form is not complicated. And I don't understand sometimes when people say that the forms are enormously complicated, because the forms are fairly straightforward. I think my frustration with the forms is maybe we're not pulling out from people exactly what they're trying to do. And actually, the number of applications we had the other day are relatively poor. We did, for the one we did fund, was actually put in by, I think it was a group of, can we say, Can we say that? No, I can't say that. All right. Well, I won't say. I won't say. But the application was put in by. Anyway, but you didn't have to have a lot of skill to put the application in. So I think that the idea that these forms are complicated is not true. They are actually quite simple. I think the problem is people don't fill in applications very well. Some people, the standard of application is quite poor. Now, maybe that is that we are not trying to ask the right questions. But I think some of the groups, as I said earlier, actually it's very difficult for them to articulate what they're trying to do. So we do need to have a different way of trying to understand the projects. And I think having a conversation with people might be a better way for some of those projects going forward, because they can then actually tell us exactly what they're trying to achieve, and we can drill down and get the answers that we want, and they can get what they're trying to do across much better.
Has there been any discussions in any of the meetings on the boards, just picking up on your issue, you mentioned body cams, the police, and improving trust, transparency, etc., etc. Has that been mentioned? Has that been talked about?
It hasn't come up formally in the board, but it's certainly come up with conversations with the police. I think it did come up in the. It came up in the.
It did come up in the board because I think it was it the deputy borough commander that was there, and we had a discussion. There was a lady. That's right, and it was about the time that I think Theresa May made some announcement about body cams, so it was topical at the time, and so certainly it's part of the agenda, and we shouldn't lose sight of it.
I just wonder, because obviously there's been heightened interest, heightened work done on how that can, change perceptions just by the fact that it's being recorded. So I wondered whether it had been mentioned. I'm sure that would be something that is further discussed. I mean, from my own perspective, I represent West Thornton, where there have been some historical issues with trust in police, etc. But this has actually been something that's been raised to me by residents as a way to instill greater confidence that, where there are issues where residents may want to challenge the police on some of the behaviour, actions, etc., they feel they have some opportunity to do so. So I thought I'd just mention it.
You're absolutely right, and I think it protects both. I think on the whole, people behave much better when they're on film, except perhaps councillors. But on the whole, I think they are, the police welcome the body cameras as well, because I think it protects them as well from accusation.
Thank you. I'm going to take us to the report. So page 30 and 2.4. And you talked there about you're in the process of reviewing the membership of the board, partly because of, if I can put it in this natural wastage, if you like, people moving away. But if I've read this correctly, I think that people serve for 1 year on the board. Is that correct? It talks about 8 new members to replace those that served their year. So I was making an assumption there that it was a... Okay, because my question actually was 1 year, was 1 year long enough to get continuity? People just start to feel their feet and then suddenly they're chucked off and someone else replaced them. But if it's 2 years, I think that's... And is there any barrier on them continuing beyond that, or is it...
It's an election process through the
Yeah, okay. I had another question on 4.1, and that's about the micro and the small grants. And I just wondered what you told us how much has been awarded, and I didn't know whether you were able to tell us what the split is between micro and small in terms of either numbers or amount of money, just to give us a feel for whether there's more micro grants coming forward or more small grants.
I don't have the actual figures in front of me, but we've not done that many micro grant awards. I mean, we've only been running that three sessions, 4 sessions. So yes, not so many on there. And of course, the funds on there are smaller. But the idea was to actually have a fund that was very easy to apply for very small pots of money, just to get something off the ground, which is still the aim. But I think probably we don't need to have 2 separate forms going forward. So given that you've probably not done very many micro grants, and they might be ones that people
A, might find it easier to apply for, and might just be like that bit of seed funding, if you like, to get things off the ground. I think you have talked about this a bit, but are we going to try and promote those very small funds, small grants better so that people know they exist?
I think generally we want to promote the active community funds altogether. Now, I think going forward, it doesn't really make sense to have two funds. I think it's quite interesting. If you say the fund's £1,000, everybody applies for £1,000. If they say the maximum you can apply for is 5,000, everybody applies for 5,000. But I think we want to get to a thing where we say, actually, there is a pot of money up to 5,000 or whatever that you could apply for. If it is just £150, you could apply for just £150, but make the process simple and appropriate to the project they're trying to fund. But I think the thing we do want to try and get it out more, I think that we don't get enough applications to it. But of course we also have the ward budgets as well, which are other ways of funding local projects. And I guess if all your councillors have it's actually quite hard to find projects to fund sometimes as well. So it's not always easy to say that there are groups out there ready to be funded.
And that's page 32, 5.2. And we have touched on this already, and that's about the lead-in time. And you say here about currently small grants are invited twice a year. And then you say one way to speed up the process to be invite applications on a monthly basis, which I think would be a positive way forward. But that's still, you're still talking about a 3-month lead-in time. And I just wondered, you know, whether it was possible to speed things up, because if someone's really enthusiastic about a project, you know, and then they have to wait 3 months to find out whether they're likely to get any funding or not, they might have lost that enthusiasm in that time, and the opportunity may have been lost.
No, I agree. What I was trying to say there is I think having a monthly rolling application process. Now, I don't know why we've got 3 months. Is there a reason why we've... It's quite a long time to me.
Members, just to say that we are talking to the community, and Carlton's part of that, to really find out what way we can engage better and how much quicker we can do this. We obviously have to balance it proportionally with it. It is public money and we have to demonstrate how we spent it. But we're going to look at different ways to how we can get that money out there in the best way that protects it as public money but gets it quickly to the areas that need it. So we're going to do more work on that very quickly to get the new fund launched.
Just to say that, because we've got to get a panel together, etc. It takes time just to do those things, but it's. But yes, I think the idea is to make it much more responsive than it currently is.
A couple of things on the Active Communities Fund and the community ward budgets. I think actually, having had the opportunity to go out and talk to voluntary groups within my ward, who I've known for a long time, and actually say to them, actually, there's some funding here. They were hugely surprised that, you know, they could apply for some money. Some, you know, wanted less than £100, some wanted, you know, significantly more. And I think actually it was a very good opportunity for small groups who generally have just got on with it in the past to actually understand that there is sometimes some money out there. And I mean, I've had everything from, you know, beekeepers who want to do education projects to a fence being put up to make, you know, a guide's hut more secure. So there's been a huge range. And I think one of the things I would say with regards to this, the Active Communities Fund, I think partly the name is confusing because active to a lot of people, when I've talked about this, has meant sport or a health-related project. It hasn't meant active in terms of, you know, active project. So I think, you know, just a communities fund actually is a much better description of what it is because people understand it more and there's no confusion about can I apply for this, can't I apply for this. Before this, we had the Small Grants Fund, and again, that was a committee of people from the voluntary sector as well as officers who made the decisions on the grants. Within that, there was, you know, priority areas that, you know, we wanted people to work within. Is the new fund still following priority areas? Do those priority areas change each time, or is there sort of some current theme that goes through? And I agree with, you know, what was said earlier about the promotion of it. You know, in terms of even the community projects, we haven't had a little plaque that we could put up saying, you know, this was done, or something that people could have at their events, which when we had the community budgets back in sort of 2006 to 2008, which were run in a slightly different way, but you know, there was that type of money there. When a project was completed, there was a sign put up, and in my own ward, for example, we put some fencing up and we improved a ball court area, and there was a big sign put up saying this was funded through Croydon Council's community budget, and that sign is still there. You know, and it just gave people that ability to understand that actually the council does fund things other than just picking up your rubbish and, you know, lighting the streets. So I think there's a lot there that can be done. Some of it's old practice that can be brought forward, but I think it's very much, as Carlton said, you know, having that advertising at the places that have benefited so that others can know about it. But I'd be interested to know about the priorities.
Yeah, I think on the name, I think, well, we can look at the name. I don't think anybody's wedded to the name particularly. I think it's just to distinguish it between some of the other funds, but I think maybe if it is confusing, then maybe we can have a look at that. With the themes, we do have themes, obviously aligned to something that we want to try and achieve. They do change, but I mean, there's some of the ones that you would expect to see in there. You know, tend to be we've got stuff on domestic abuse and sexual violence, etc. We have stuff the last fund that we put in the digital stuff in that because we wanted to fund some digital projects. Some of them are sort of more static, but we do change the themes, but they all want to be priority areas. So we do want to try and say to people, you know, the fund is going to be used, and that's the general way we're looking with the voluntary sector funding, is what are the priority areas, where do we really want to be spending public money to bring the best benefit to our residents. So I think we will stick with those themes. I think you're right, we don't promote it very well. I think the other thing, I'd like to see the idea of plaques and say, I mean, of course they cost money and something else to do. But yes, absolutely. I think the other thing we do is maybe just have a list of all the projects that are funded, because actually I've been round to some of the small groups that have been funded by the fund, and they're doing some fantastic work. And I think actually people should know about, you know, this, what they've done here with £1,000, for instance, is quite fantastic. There's a huge amount of work sometimes, an incredible benefit that we get from that, from just £1,000, and actually could inspire other people to come together and do that. So I think not just promoting the fund, but I think promoting the things that have been funded and what other people have done is being part of what we want to do.
Can I ask, Cabinet Member, on 2.4 on the pack, page 30, there's some information on the membership of the board, and the Residents Association Forum doesn't seem to have taken up its places. Could you say a bit more about what's happened there? Was there sufficient advertising and kind of what's happened, please?
I might ask Sharon to come in, because what happened, there is a Residents Association Forum. I think they met and then they decided they couldn't elect people, because we obviously said the forum can have some representatives to the board, and obviously the board, we can't have all of them to be represented. And then I think they had, within themselves, they had a confusion about who should be going on that, who should represent the residents' associations. There was an idea that actually whoever got elected to go from the residents' association form couldn't represent all the residents' associations. So actually, the offer is still open there. There's places for the residents' association on the board. It's up for the residents' association group to decide who they're going to send. They've never actually come down and worked out how they're going to effectively send somebody. That's my understanding. But the places are open for them if they want to be on there. We can't have every resident association on the board, otherwise it becomes a resident association forum. But we wanted to have some places for residents associations.
And one would assume that people involved in resident association were particularly neighbourly. But obviously not always the case. I just want to go back over a couple of points that Steve made and some Mumtaz and Carlton made. In terms of what success would look like, because we've got a number of initiatives here, and I'm trying to work out at this moment in time, are we on the right road? Are we going in the right direction? Are we going fast enough? I'm struggling a little bit to know whether are we speeding up in the sense of is a slow start? I mean, some of this work has been going on for years. I mean, some of the people involved in this, And then the other part of the question really is that in some other committees that we've looked at, thinking about children and young people, you know, certain communities are mentioned, so like Albanian community, where they're a newer community, mostly younger men. I mean, that could be maybe said in the past about the Afghanistani community. There were some issues previously among sort of some Tamil groups that were in Croydon that may not have had the same structures, partly because of the makeup of the community at the time. How do we ensure community cohesion with groups that may not have a sort of traditional family structure at that moment in time, where people are maybe quite isolated? So I just want, as I said, you know, how do we measure success, and, you know, are all groups really getting an active role or not?
There was quite a negative spotlight on voluntary organisations, on issues around governance, financial management, quality standards. Well, there are good benchmarks. We've got some good projects going on, helping groups to get quality marks around volunteering and other issues. On governance, the trustees that we have, it's one of those hidden volunteer bands that we don't really say much about, but we can do more, I think, to illustrate how good the governance is for a lot of organisations. On funding, I was at the Coast to Capital meeting yesterday. They're reissuing a call for £350,000 across the whole Coast to Capital region, and there was a strong hint that they would support another area-based fund. So, you know, let's look at how much we can fundraise in the hundreds of thousands that we should be leveraging into Croydon.
And the issue of, I don't know if anyone else
on the new communities, we've got a fantastic organisation, not part of CVA. It's actually run by the Red Cross. Meets every Saturday afternoon for young refugees in the borough, many of them suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And what they do is create that family environment that you just talked about. Sometimes they just sit there, have coffee, make dinner. Sometimes they watch a film, and they go visiting places. I mentioned the Afghan group. We've got, talking about funds, we've got through Big Local £1 million over 10 years. So they've allocated £100,000. This is for just activities on the London Road, some of it very small scale. But what's fantastic is that already we've got communities working together. And I think that's an opportunity for us to look at partnership bids supporting that community action.
So who are the voice of these new communities? Is it
in the case of Big Local,
outsiders work on their behalf, or is part of the road trying to develop their own internal leaders?
Entirely. They're budget holding. They have a partnership. It's the executive. CVA just enables, facilitates. But again, this conundrum of funding, it's a lot of money, £100,000, but we'll be supporting, probably to begin with, groups with just £200 or £300. I have to say, we don't set up a panel for that. We get good ideas and we fund them there and then. But what I think we've got the opportunity to look at in the borough is how that kind of very micro funding can lead onto a small grant. You know, what's the cycle that groups can go through in terms of starting up some activity, but they're not disappearing because they, you know, had a couple of £100 and don't see anything else. You know, I think we need to tutor and mentor organisations up to going for £5,000 and then beyond, because, you know, that's how all the best voluntary organisations have started, from those very modest beginnings.
The implication is that we're not doing that well enough at the moment. It's collectively across Croydon.
I think we're doing it. It's always a challenge to do it as widely as we can. We've got a big borough with lots of organisations.
No, it may come across negative, but I think you may have said it's a challenge. So that's assume that we're not doing it as well as one would like.
I certainly think we can be more effective in pooling our resources and even looking at pooling the funds. You know, we've got that other challenge of making sure that with these small grants, we don't duplicate. We encourage organisations to work more effectively together. It is quite resource intensive, though, doing that one-to-one work with groups to make sure that they do justice to the ideas they've got and produce quality bids can take time.
I think it's more than just about funding. I think in terms of your question is the Stronger Communities Board is one board that sits within the LSP, and through those different lenses there's lots of intelligence on changes within our borough in terms of diversity and new communities. And I think how we pool that through the LSP Chief Execs Group and indeed the LSP itself is really important about identifying new communities. And therefore, from the Council's viewpoint and other statutory partners, the Active Communities Fund and microgrants, it's an opportunity for those groups to use that money so that we can be flexible to changes within our communities or emerging voices that we don't often recognise immediately. But, you know, it's very, very difficult to get in contact with people who don't want to contact us. So really we need to rely on our communities coming together in a stronger communities board to use that intelligence to alert us to those issues. So I think we've got mechanisms in place. Steve has highlighted some of them, but it will always be a challenge because I think it's a challenging nature of our transition, you know, transient community, which Croydon has got a large and growing population. It is quite transient.
I just want to, sorry, one of my pet subjects really is efficiency. And I think just as important as attracting new funding is the management of funding, because I think we need to make sure that actually we get value for money from that. And part of that, I think, and I don't have this, you know, a great deal of evidence, but I think that part of that might be the quality of trustees or the expertise that we have in some of these organisations. And so I would say we need a bit of a balance here, get the money in, but make sure that we have people who really can spend it well, because we don't always do that.
Okay, I'm going to close that item down. Thank you very much. We're going to, at the end of the meeting, we'll consider issues about conclusion recommendations, but I'm going to move on to the next item, which is now going to be the final item of the meeting. Which is the Safer Croydon Partnership. There's a third, just give an opportunity for those people to leave. Not everyone is staying, I believe, for the final part. You don't need to stay for this one if you've been... So we've got a presentation?
We have a presentation.
Yep. Yes, we'll set that up.
Okay, first slide, community safety. Just setting out what our manifesto priorities were within community safety, domestic abuse and sexual violence, and that, I think within that includes things like human trafficking, FGM, etc. A clear priority, I think, for us as administration, but I think for the borough as a whole. It's been an area that we've always wanted to be trying to tackle. The whole evening economy, how do we balance the evening economy, some of the issues that came up earlier, but how do we have a vibrant, diverse, exciting evening economy and balancing that with a safe, safe place for people to go out in the evening and to be able to manage. The whole fear of crime, I think, you know, many of the stats we talk about within this are that we're seeing that crime is going down, but people's perceptions of crime still remain at odds with the facts. I think Croydon suffers a bit from that. Partly, I think, just because we are a big borough, so lots of things happen, more so than any other borough, probably just because of the size. But if you look at a lot of our crime stats on a sort of per thousand population basis, we are mid-ranking or below average on most of those statistics. But I think there is still an issue of fear of crime, and we've done a couple of surveys on that and a whole lot of programme to be able to change perceptions on crime. We have the whole prevent strategy and then the MOPAC 7 figures. Next slide. So the Safer Croydon Partnership, we're looking at the performance and the improvements with the MOPAC 7 numbers. So what we've seen compared to the previous year, there's been big reductions in burglary. I mean, that's the 13% over the year, but I think that the number from the baseline is even higher than that. It's about 40-odd%. Same with robbery, and I always say the sort of crimes that a lot of people worry about is being robbed in their house, or being burgled in their house, or robbed in the street. Those crimes we are seeing quite big reductions of. Same with the theft. Theft of mobile phones have gone down, mainly because they've become pointless stealing in many ways. And then there have also been some reductions in violence and injury, and that includes domestic abuse and general violence in the industry. Next slide. So the achievements, as we've already talked about, the eyes and ears rollout and the enforcement teams out there. We've done a whole programme. The board has looked very much at the Pride in Croydon plan, which is about changing the perceptions of Croydon, talking about the brand that we have. We've done walkabouts both with the Borough Commander and the Deputy Borough Commander. Paul has been out as well. We've been round. I think they're a very useful exercise, going out actually meeting people in their community, talking to shopkeepers. I think the first one we did along London Road, I think there was we'd gone to a community meeting and had one view of the crime and issues along London Road, and then when we went and spoke to the shopkeepers, we had a very different view. The shopkeepers were telling us it was about 90% better than it had been, that it's actually, that they felt very safe. I think the biggest issue people had, I think somebody had, kids hanging around shops rather than any great serious crime. Not to say there aren't issues up there, but the perception from the shopkeepers and from, we went to the mosques as well and talking to people in there. Quite interesting to go to the mosque and talk to, I think there must have been about 100 people in the mosque, and the biggest issue that came out was parking, which actually seems to be the main issue that comes out about in all these walkabouts, is parking rather than the crime. We have launched a whole strategy around domestic abuse and sexual violence, more funding going into the Family Justice Centre, the White Ribbon campaign. We've done national petitions. I think there's a lot of work being done, going up into Crystal Palace and working with the foundation up there, really trying to change attitudes on domestic abuse, including a number of campaigns using the deco posters as well, and plus within the council as well. And then we've developed a whole youth crime prevention plan, which was taken to Cabinet about 6 months ago, and the work on Surrey Street, which we've already talked about. Next slide. So the challenges, I think the fear of crime and then the regeneration, and how does that play out? I mean, people want to invest in Croydon, and I think we need to change some of those perceptions to get that greater investment. I think the regeneration itself, certainly in areas like London Road and West Croydon Station, are having a big impact already on the feeling of the area and changing some of those perceptions. The evening economy, I think there's still challenges around that, and as I say, I think pretty much the police and us are completely aligned on a lot of the issues. I think there's still work to be done around the evening economy. We want to get everybody around the table, as I said earlier, to make sure that we get the licences, the police, the air licensing department around working together to create the evening economy that we all want. The violence with injury, part of that is the late night violence with injury, but also the domestic abuse still stubbornly. I think the numbers are going down now, but they're still quite high. We do need to be tackling repeat offences on domestic abuse. And hate crime, and hate crime numbers are going up. Again, it's a crime that is dramatically underreported. Most hate crime doesn't get reported, so I think it's good that hate crime does get reported, but it's always a difficult thing when you're understanding the stats, is whether the numbers going up is a good thing because more people are inclined to report hate crime, or whether actually there is just more hate crime happening. I think that is a key priority for the board to look at and try and understand some of those figures, particularly around Islamophobia. The events in Belgium today don't help many of those issues. But we also have things like the EU referendum coming up, and some of the rhetoric around that, I think, can also be unhelpful when we're looking at hate crime. That's unless you want me to say more.
Thank you, Mark. I don't. If Paul, I don't. If you can just introduce yourself, so that formally to the meeting, on this item.
Good evening, Paul Asprey, Deputy Borough Commander at Croydon Police Station.
And
Andy Opie, I'm the Director of Safety in the Council.
I'm Paula Doherty. I'm the Strategic Lead for Domestic Abuse, Sexual Violence and Troubled Families.
Chair, I'm Safe Croydon and Intelligence Partnership Manager.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm the National Probation Service Lead for Croydon, Merton and Sutton. So I lead on probation operations within the borough.
Thank you. Mary, do you want to go first?
Thank you. In your document, you talk about the evening economy, which, as you know, is something I'm quite interested in. I live very close to the area where a lot of the bars and clubs are, and since the closure of Tiger, there has been a noticeable reduction in the number of people in the town centre of a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday evening, and therefore a huge reduction in the number of visible police officers. So my first question is, where have the police officers gone? What are they doing instead of being in the town centre? And is it a better use of their time than being in the town centre policing a club?
Yeah, to answer that, Croydon found itself in the unenviable position of being the #1 hotspot for violence in London for a nighttime economy. So as a result, we put assets into the town centre on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, more on a Friday and Saturday to address the footfall. Tiger was, I think, most probably the largest venue with a huge capacity. Of course, when that closed, it didn't necessitate the same police officers. The police officers who were patrolling on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night were taken from other teams within the station. So we just did not call for those staff, and they would stay and remain on their teams, whether it be neighbourhood or response teams, which is effectively the officers who run from call to call through the day. So it means that we have got more assets available, less assets in the town centre, and Thursday really now is old hat. Friday, Saturday we're still seeing as many people, and I'm sure Andy may be able to put some context. But if you compare the footfall now to 2-3 years ago, it's dramatically dropped off, the amount of people coming into Croydon on a Friday, Saturday night. And I say Thursday, really, typically we get in between maybe 300 to 400, whereas a few years ago you would have 500 to 600. So they're either finding somewhere else to go, or they've just grown out of that cycle.
I can come in if you want. Yeah, just to echo what Paul has said, I think footfall has dropped over the last few years, and certainly compared to 10 years ago. I mean, the capacity in Croydon Town Centre is massively reduced, and I don't think that's unique to Croydon. I think that's a pattern that's being seen all over London and nationally. You know, the big nightclub venues like Tiger. I saw something recently, there was a BBC article where I think 50% of those types of nightclubs have shut over the last few years. So patterns of going out and socialising are changing, and I think we're seeing that in Croydon Town Centre.
Thank you, Chair. Just to take the opportunity while you're here, Mr Asprey, I was wondering, following on from the question that was just asked about the number of police that are in the centre on a Friday or Saturday night. I'm the chair of licensing, by the way, in Croydon. I've had on a few occasions, we've had clubs that in other areas, in West Thornton and Thornton Heath, that have said that there is very little policing around their clubs. And have actually given the opposite complaint to what some of the clubs in Central Croydon are giving. And I just wondered, how do you allocate? Is it on numbers? Is it on footfall? Is it per area? You know, why are some areas policed more heavily than others, and they have similar clubs?
Yeah, it's based on demand, and if we were to look at the crime that's occurred over, let's just say, the last 12 months, we would find it's centralised in the town centre as opposed to some of the disparate areas you've touched upon. I mean, we do have officers across the borough, and they would respond dynamically to some of the incidents at other areas. But primarily the focus is on the town centre. And as I say, that's because historically it has been one of London's most violent places, unfortunately.
I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit about being one of the most violent areas. What kind of crimes would we be looking at? Is it all those crimes that were listed up there? Robbery and violence to oneself?
Primarily antisocial behaviour, violence, very little domestic violence, which is a good thing for us, low-level theft, so really alcohol-related or drug and alcohol-related, we would see. But I just think that Croydon's quite unique in the way the licensed premises are situated as opposed to some of the other London boroughs. And if you think of the egress of the people trying to get away on a Friday, Saturday night when you can have anything up to 2,000 people trying to sort of move in a sort of 2-3 hour period with limited access to get away, taxi routes, and then, of course, fast food outlets where some of them congregate, that's the challenge. But that's what we have, and I think we need to work together to improve it and make it more safe.
A couple of issues. The first one is with regards to the comments you made about hate crime. Clearly, there is an issue about reporting, but I think it's interesting that the more people talk about it, the more likely you are to get it reported. And I think we've seen that with things like child abuse, with domestic violence. Once it becomes something that people feel more able to talk about, it is something that can actually, yes, go up in number, but be dealt with in a better way. Is there anything that the board is doing to try and encourage hate crime to be reported more? And if there is that with sort of all communities where hate crime is a problem, or is it working better with some rather than others? My next question is about a different subject, so I'll leave it with that one and then come on to the other in a minute.
With hate crime, it is something the board are interested in. I think there's two things. There's the hate crime that is actually that the police might be interested in do something about. But a lot of hate crime occurs that people think they don't report it because they think, well, the person's gone off, they're just a name in the street or whatever. We're trying to encourage more people to report some of that, so we have an idea of this hate crime that is going on. When we go out and round to the communities, we're specifically asking people to give us their examples of hate crime happening, because a lot of people will say, well, actually, anecdotally will say this has happened in the street. A lot of Muslim women, for instance, have an issue with people shouting at them in the street. They don't report that anywhere else, but we want to try and pick that up and try and understand what is happening. I would like to see us to have a better mechanism so people can report crime, even if it's not a crime that they think the police need to deal with. We want to know it's happening so we get an idea of patterns that are happening. There's lots of hate crime that happens and people don't even think it's the crime themselves. They just think it's part of the normal banter. And I think actually the law on hate crime has moved on quite a lot. So lots of things that people might not have thought was actually a hate crime can actually be hate crime and be prosecuted for. And I think there's some case law that's happened fairly recently on that, particularly about some homophobic stuff as well. So I think it's getting people to understand that actually this is a hate crime. So a lot of people don't understand that actually it occurred. But find a mechanism to get that reported. And the serious hate crime, you need to go to the police. But we still need to understand some of those other low-level bits of hate crime so we can pick up a pattern about what really is happening. And it is, whenever we go to any community groups, when we go to the mosque or anywhere else, talk to other people, that's one of the first things that we talk about is the reporting of hate crime and whether they've been experiencing it.
I'm pleased that that's been done. I mean, I think there is an issue where the low-level stuff, people don't want to bother the police with it because it's not something they feel that's going to be looked into any further because, as you say, the person's walked away or it's a minor issue compared to the other workload the police has. But I think you've made a good point about having an opportunity to report it. And I just wonder whether there is something that the board can do that would allow people to go online, you know, and say, this happened to me in this place, which could then build up a picture of, you know, where specific types of hate crime are taking place, so that, and actually then you can target, you know, the resources better in those specific areas. It's just a thought. You don't have to respond to that necessarily at the moment. Okay.
There is a Met Police one I think people can do, and I think there's a link on our website where people can report hate crime as well. I think the issue is it's not very easily accessible, and I think that's what we don't want to do is repeat something else that's already out there, so you don't do it. And it's also the question of what happens to those reports after, who collates them. And I think there is a sort of London-wide reporting scheme. Quite where those stats go, I'm not quite sure. I don't know, Paul, do you know any?
No, I don't, but if it's any comfort, Croydon are leading for a pilot in London in relation to hate crime. And one of our detective inspectors has got the lead for the South. But your point is absolutely right. It's raising awareness. And, you know, to the person that's happened, who's been subject to that hate crime, it's most probably the worst thing that's happened to them. And so to sort of, not sort of demean it as a crime, because yes, we do have more serious things, but to that person, it's very serious. So, and it is a little bit like domestic abuse, which I'm sure Paula has great depth of knowledge on. If people are suffering on a regular basis, it can seriously affect them psychologically, and sometimes it can escalate to physical crime. So, but there are mechanisms, and it's most probably one of the newer parts of crime reporting that we're actually trying to sort of move forward on.
Thank you. Actually, that leads me nicely on to the next subject. I mean, clearly, I chair the Children and Young People Scrutiny panel, and one of the things we've looked at is domestic violence that affects and how it affects children, as opposed to, you know, sort of just looking at the adult's point of view, and also the issues of child sexual exploitation. Within the board, clearly there is a lot of work going on, and we heard at the last meeting about, with the CSE, the initiatives taking place with the taxis and the hotels. Is there anything additional being done with regards to the CSE and with regards to the domestic violence? How do all the parts within the partnership work in terms of if there is, you know, an escalation at a particular time, you know, sort of around Christmas or something? How is the partnership working to enable those people who have been affected by the domestic violence to get additional support?
I'm probably going to ask Paul, do you want to, I mean, it makes more sense to you.
I mean, I think if you look at the campaign we ran over the past year, going back to the World Cup, that was our first major campaign because we knew that domestic abuse, domestic violence spikes around the World Cup. So the campaign was, what time does it kick off in your house? Then if you look at the linkages, the Christmas campaign was about, it was related to Boxing Day and showed imagery of somebody that had been harmed. The next campaign was around coercion and control, linking nicely to a change in the law. The last campaign was about protecting people that can't protect themselves, which was this last Christmas campaign, which was aimed at children. So I think that there's a broad strategy that looks at, you know, what's happening thematically. Is it in the art? Is it on, you know, is it domestic abuse currently on the Archers or in Hollyoaks? So you know you get a spike in requests for support around those times. So the services are there, and they are a bit like a concertina. We do need to move them in and out to respond to need. But I think we're quite strategic in our domestic abuse and sexual violence work. I think the linkages now, picking up on your earlier point around children sexually exploited, the links to peer-on-peer violence are starting to be picked up through a high-risk panel. So we are linking those, and there's a lot more sort of pan-London and national approaches for CSE, which we're constantly looking at to see how we can better improve and tie into. Because I think you pointed out the last time, you know, we think about the Rotherham report, the number of those victims that experience CSE have gone on to be in domestically abusive relationships, and again, it's a corrosive behaviour.
Thank you. Okay, so page 37, 1.3 in the report. it talks about more efficient use of technology and being able to share information more easily. And it talks in previous years, officers spent time in the town centre and other locations collating feedback. Do people still go out and collect that information from people in the street so that it's not, if you like, the only people contributing to these surveys are people who voluntarily do it because they're interested, but you're getting information from, you know, just Joe Public in the street, and that you're using tablets or whatever to collect that information so it doesn't have to be input twice?
The most recent Fear of Crime survey, which is only closed a couple of weeks ago, was purely done online. It was using the council's online engagement platform, simply because, you know, it's a more efficient way of us to collect the data. Now, I mean, we haven't fully crunched all of the numbers yet, but for the first time, we've actually collected more demographic information, so we know where people are living, ethnicity, sex, age, etc. And actually, I think that's probably. I'm not going to say too much about it now because we need to go through it properly. But already I've discussed with Mark that I think that means that we probably need to look at other ways of engaging with certain communities, because I think it is a bit skewed in terms of the feedback that we've had. So there are particular communities that are inputting to that survey and other communities that are not.
Yeah. That was essentially my concern, that we weren't getting as broad a cross-section of the public as we could do if we're not just going out and randomly stopping people in the street. Okay, it's good to hear that that's been recognised, if you like, and that we're going to move forward.
To be fair on that, though, I think if you look at the many other ways that we engage with people, there's a certain demographic that tends to be more vocal and is more likely to engage with us than other communities. So it's across the board, and I think that the trick from not just from on the stuff that we're trying to do here, but right across the council, is how do we start engaging some of those other people that we don't normally come in contact with, because they're not people that are going to come to meetings either.
That's why I was kind of focusing on just going out and kind of grabbing people off the street, because you are more likely to get, you know, it is indeed, but you're not going to get the usual suspects then, as I tend to call them. And that's not in a police way. So in the report on page 38, 1.4, you talk about less grant funding means that there's less commissioning of projects to tackle certain things, which is impact on our ability to innovate and try new things. And I wondered what sort of things that you wanted to tackle that are not being tackled because of this.
Well, I mean, historically, over the last 2 or 3 years, possibly longer than that, we've seen a gradual, reduction in grant funding that has been made available to the local authority. We've had to the partnership, sorry, and that's not just the Safer Croydon Partnership. We've seen that in things like drug partnerships, and other service areas as well. What that's meant is that we've had to be much more focused, A, on what our priorities are, and B, making sure that we're commissioning things that are based on good evidence and good practice, and we're monitoring them effectively. We have a good programme of activity at the moment. The Safer Croydon Partnership have funding from the GLA, from MOPAC, about £600,000 a year. There are half a dozen projects funded out of that dealing with offender management, gangs, sexual exploitation, a couple of other things, mentoring of young people. And generally, by and large, they are performing very well. If we had more money, there were many other things that we could be delivering. So it's really about us having to take difficult choices in terms of how we allocate that appropriately.
Yeah, I think I was just concerned that there might be things falling through the gaps, if you like, that aren't being looked at, that maybe should be being looked at. And obviously I understand the funding pressures, but I just wanted that bit of clarification on that.
Just a bit of a follow-up. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. Actually, I think what we're seeing is it's a slight shift in the way that some of that funding is being allocated. There is actually some funding available to the voluntary sector, so it's coming less to the statutory organisations. And we have a good example of a project that Steve Fore is leading on. Unfortunately, he's not here to talk about it, which is about victims of crime. And that's some short-term funding that was only made available to the voluntary sector that CVA have managed to pick up and run with very, very quickly, seeing some very, very good results. So there are pockets of funding available, but they're not generally being made available to the local authority or to the statutory partners.
So page 41, where we're talking about repeat offending and the restructured probation service. And obviously accepting that the probation service has been restructured and it's now in two very distinct parts. I just wondered how much has the loss, because I understand there's been quite a turnover of staff in the part of the probation service that has changed the most, if I can put it that way. How much that loss of experienced staff from that part of the service has impacted on how offenders are monitored and, you know, kept on the right track, basically.
I can speak for the National Probation Service, and it's unfortunate that my counterpart for the Community Rehabilitation Company isn't here tonight. On the National Probation Service side of operations, we've not seen any reductions in our resources. We were given a stretch target to meet against our budget, which we've managed to do by not employing as many sessional report writers as we usually do. We've got targets around writing reports to submit to court, and we've managed to save funding by moving resources around and getting more dedicated report writers in that regards. On the CRC side of operations, yes, they've been through quite a bit of change more recently in the last couple of months as they've moved towards a new cohort model. And the company that runs the CRC, I understand, is looking to make savings. It's a privately run organisation, and they've got to make the decisions as they see fit in order to make ends meet. But from a National Probation Service perspective, there's been no reduction in our resources, and our number one priority remains protecting the public through the effective rehabilitation of the offenders that come across our books, some of which are first-time offenders, some of which are repeat offenders. We have a plethora of interventions that we use to work with our service users, from accredited programs right through to one-to-one interventions. And more recently, within the last few months, I've been leading on a new initiative for London to provide mentoring and coaching support for sex offenders with a company, an organisation called Circles UK. They're an organisation that runs nationally, but have received lottery funding to provide that provision in London, so some of our sex offenders will get that wraparound service to keep them on the straight and narrow going forwards. And Croydon will be the first borough in London that will see that rollout of that service in April.
Just want to, we didn't get any acknowledgement or an apology from London CRC. Just wanted to know from the partnership, are they attending the partnership meetings as such?
Historically, they have, but they've just changed recently the way that they are supporting local partnerships. Previously, it was the local manager, but now they have relationship managers, I think, or something like that. So they've changed the model. They weren't at the last meeting. We've identified an issue, and Cheryl and I are meeting actually with the regional manager next week. I think it is certainly within the next week or two.
You got no response from them at all.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, for an organisation that is, if we're going to monitor the effectiveness of the partnership. I mean, I understand because of timings and stuff that Steve may have had to leave, and I'm sure other people have had to leave because the meeting's running late. But the partnership is about the people taking an active role as much as people implementing their policies. We need to be certain that we are getting an active. So just on that one, are there any organisations that are currently struggling to get people in attendance to the meeting, to the partnerships or to the relevant groups?
I wouldn't want to single out any particular organisation.
I'm asking you a question so you can single them out if they're not attending.
Well, no. I'm not singling anyone out because I don't think there is a particular pattern that an organisation or an individual is particularly absent. I think of all of the agencies that probably sit around the table, the CRC has probably gone through the biggest change recently, and they've just changed the way that I've just said in terms of how they're supporting local partnerships. Having said that, the subgroup structure that we have, the integrated offender management group and the day-to-day partnership working is as effective as it's ever been. I don't think there has been a risk, certainly not that I've identified, in terms of support and engagement with offenders. And actually, recently, we've actually seen our reoffending figures improve further. So actually, performance in that sort of respect is good.
We always caution the use of one-year statistics versus another year's set of statistics because they do, by their very nature, jump around. We were looking for the longer-term trends. I'm just sort of conscious on the time. There is one question, so I'll come. So on item 7, which is on page 43, or paragraph 7, about speeding cars and injury, and as we know from the paper. From the original paper attached, it wasn't a priority in the 14-17, the issue of people being killed or injured by speeding cars. We had to we raised it, and I think the previous, it hadn't been changed, but it got a paragraph added in towards the end. Through Mark's intervention. But note in 7.1 it says safety and security on the transport network is a priority for safer transport. And then it goes on to say that the SST has recently added collision reduction. Quite a significant number of people are getting injured and killed on our roads each year. It seems, again, some of these issues here that are listed are good, but they're not going to make major reductions, seeing that Croydon has a particularly poor record in terms of the number of people being killed. And community safety must be about protecting people's lives or reducing injury. And I've just, this commitment from the Safer Transport team, is that, something that's just been written into this report, or is that actually a reality that maybe Paul could say, what is the priority of the police in terms of speeding cars? Because if you look at our accident traffic statistics, I think 13 people killed one year. We've had a high number of people injured. And over the years, it doesn't seem to be reflected in our strategy. Is that changed now?
Unfortunately, I don't think I can help you very much in that. The Safer Transport Command has their own strategy, and whilst they sit locally in Croydon Police Station, they are driven by a different command strategy. But I actually agree with you. I'm head of the CID as well as a Deputy Borough Commander, but it exercises me the amount of deaths we have on Croydon roads. I don't know if Croydon is unique. It is a huge borough, and I don't know, is it a particular part of the borough, whether it's the south, the central or north, and I don't know what work has been done. It's certainly something I can take back to the Safer Transport Command, unless Councillor Watson's been cited on anything further on that. But in all fairness, we don't get cited in that much detail from Safer Transport with respect to their strategies and policing priorities across London.
So, I mean, this is my big issue about this, is that, you know, the partnership is, I mean, it talks in here sometimes, the partnership role sometimes about implementation, not about influencing policy. But, you know, Croydon does seem to have a historically high level of, you know, has a high level of accidents compared to other London boroughs of similar type. So maybe it's worth us exploring the issue of the SSTT about what their policies are, because, you know, we need to be I need to understand, or we need to understand what they're actually doing. I mean, is it an issue about enforcement, or is it an issue that could be about roads, the poorly designed roads in Croydon and junctions, or it could be, as I said, driver behaviour, because the view is that there's less enforcement of speeding in this borough. We don't know. So maybe it's something, it would be good to get some information from the Safer Transport team about what their policies and procedures actually are in regards to this issue.
Yeah, just quickly, I think you're absolutely right, and I don't know percentage-wise if we're seeing more deaths of motorcycle users, pedestrians or vehicles, or a combination, or heavy goods vehicles. So I think that needs to be broken down. But certainly one of their strategic aims will be to reduce deaths and injuries on London roads.
I would just say we did meet with the Safer Transport team some time ago and talk about what their strategies were. But I do think it's probably something we could bring back to the board at some point shortly, really, to get a better feel of that. So we have had meetings with them on the strategy. It's a separate team from the general police team. But I think it's also probably worth bringing in the council, some of the council officers as well, who are aware of particular roads where speeding is a problem.
But there seems to be a need, one recognition that there is an issue, and I'm not convinced that this paperwork over the years has actually reflected the issue. And you're not the first representative of the Metropolitan Police, Borough Commander Muscat. He raised the issue of road accidents in the past himself. So it's something that the police have certainly raised at meetings. But as I said, for me, I wouldn't want to do each year and ask the same question, saying, you know, do we accept that there's a problem in Croydon and what we're doing about it? And and when we use the we, I mean the various partnerships. So, Andy, I think you were going to come back as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, to have, you know, there is a road safety team in the council. It's not based within my service area. It's based within Steve Isles' area and streets. It's based in the highways team, effectively, who work very closely with the police. We monitor road deaths. They put in place actions in terms of, you know, hotspots and you know, look at what we can do in terms of traffic calming. And we've tried to set out, you know, a broad update in terms of some of the work that they're doing. And, you know, I think what they're doing is, you know, is pretty good. In order to have a proper debate, though, I think we need different people around the table who are the experts in this particular field. So we can certainly do that through the Safer Croydon Partnership, and it's something that we possibly can be more cited on. But in terms of a scrutiny item, I think we need to look at inviting different people to that discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my last couple of questions in regards to young people, because, of course, there's a lot of drug-related young crime is going in different places up, but I don't know exactly about in Croydon, whether it's, you know, how you're working and it's increasing or going down. And second question, again, is young people. We have seen a lot of young Muslim people are, you know, diverting to extremism, which is, you know, by influence from bad people. But how you are working with these people, whether you have gathering intelligence, working well, or, you know, we haven't got any problem, you know, in Croydon Borough.
Well, I'll start and other people can come in. I think we young people, we have got a whole youth strategy on that. And I think when I presented it last time, I think one thing to bear in mind is actually, although we've got thousands of young people in Croydon, a huge number of young people, but there's only about 600 of our young people come in contact with the police authorities, and of those, quite often there's issues of other multiple issues within them, family background, mental health issues, a number of issues with our young people. So our youth strategy does look at young people. And I think on the whole, most of our young people get on and are law-abiding and get on with their lives. So, I don't think there's a particular issue with young people across the borough. But we do have a very good youth strategy, and I'll let Andy talk a little bit about that in a moment. On the extremism, we do have the prevent strategy here, and we do refer people. We're not a Home Office target area for that, so we don't get extra funding for it, which is a good thing in the sense that we're not considered to have a huge problem. But we do refer people to the prevent strategy. We do have a whole programme looking at radicalisation of young people and working with young people on that. I don't think we have the same issues as other parts of London have, but there is a whole programme of work going on around that. Do you want to say anything else on prevent?
Prevent. I mean, I've set out what the channel panel is and the process about that. Prevent is something that has kind of risen up the agenda over the last 12 months, and in the last 2 or 3 months, particularly following the Paris attacks. But there is now a new statutory duty. We as a partnership, have been doing lots and lots of training and engagement with various, teams and organisations. Lots of work in schools. With social workers, etc. And what we've seen, what we've seen is an increase in referrals through to the channel process, but actually very, very few of them are converting into kind of cases that we are managing. So what that is telling me is that we are raising awareness effectively at the moment, and people are referring on for further advice if they need to. Thankfully, we're not seeing, an increase in cases that the panel are having to actually manage. On the youth crime strategy and area, I think by and large good performance around the youth offending team. We are seeing less people coming into the youth justice system for the first time. Reoffending is moving in the right direction. There are other areas in terms of use of youth custody as well, which we're seeing positive positive work. But always, we want to look at how we can improve further, which is why we've put the youth crime prevention plan in place, both about how we can prevent people from getting involved in the first place, but also making sure that we've got the right sort of safeguarding and enforcement mechanisms in place, as well as engaging with youth victims and young people as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There's obviously some conclusion recommendations that we can discuss, but I'd like to say thank you to the officers and to the police representatives and from the probation. It is a bit later than one would like, but we appreciate the fact that you have stayed and answered some questions as well, made some contributions. So you can all go. I'm sure you have other things. As we've jumped around some other items tonight, we have got them completed. The webcast should now be finishing, and then we've just got a couple other items, just very quick items to just to confirm, and then that